Everything begins in a different world in the Dacian dynasty within the imperial palace. The emperor has died, and the dumbest, most ill-mannered, neglected, and loser son has ascended to the throne. This is Tu Yi, and it was supposed to be another brother who took the throne. He only got this position because of some corrupt politicians who wanted to put him there. Scratching his head, the protagonist wonders why he had to become this massive loser. Obviously, he was transmigrated from Earth, where he worked editing videos of girls dancing. He didn't exactly love that job, until on his laptop, a message popped up asking which dynasty he would go to if he could travel. But he just said that was a stupid question. He started a keyboard war, arguing that the past was garbage. There were no discounts on anything, everything was harder, you could catch a disease and die, and besides, there were no girls dancing on screens. But now, sitting on the throne, he wonders if this is some kind of joke. So he, who hates this whole dynasty thing, ended up in a place like this. However, the bracelet on his arm begins to glow. A voice says it is the artificial intelligence system called Ben, and it can be called Bengshin. The protagonist is startled. Apparently, he's not experienced with reincarnations. The system then gives him his mission, which was quite simple. He just needed to let the Clan dynasty be completely destroyed and he would return to his world. Meanwhile, the white-haired girl wonders what this useless guy is thinking. Normally, he smiles when he looks at her, but today something was different. Tu Yi then turns to the side, wondering who she is and what that is. In his mind, various attributes appear and the system says she is one of his concubines, basically meant to keep an eye on what he was doing. He could see the stats of anyone related to his objective. The system informs him that her name is Zhao Shu, and basically, she serves to spy on him. She's wondering if she's seeing something strange or if he's looking at her differently. Scratching his chin, he knows that this beautiful woman is just there to spy on him, but her charm is undeniably strong. As she wonders if he's seen through her disguise skills, because it seemed like he had noticed something. Suddenly, someone calls out to him beside him. A long-haired man says he seems a bit distracted and asks what's on his mind. Tu Yi already knows this guy must be one of the traitors who made him ascend to the throne. Seeing the stats, the man has 94 intelligence and is the prime minister of the Clan dynasty. Obviously, he was part of the plan to put Tu Yi on the throne to use him as a puppet. Nearby was another minister, Zhao Zuo, who had blood, power, and immense influence in this place, and was also Zhao Shu's father. While the girl tries to understand why he's acting differently today, he's more concerned about how huge these guys' attributes are. Then Zhao Zuo points something out to him and asks if he's worried that the throne he sits on won't be stable. Tu Yi responds that he actually wants the throne to be unstable and that soon the entire country will perish. Zhao Shu is impressed that he responded this way to her father's provocation. Zhao Zuo comments that the boy must be uneasy since his brother, named Tu Su, who should have ascended the throne, is out leading troops. Tu Yi now understands why he took the throne and how these men are manipulating the situation. Zhao Zuo reminds him that they are disobeying the laws and imperial decree by placing the boy on that throne. He knocks on the emperor's coffin and says it's fine because it won't open and the emperor won't kill him. However, the same can't be said for Tu Su, and besides, news of the emperor's death hasn't spread yet. He shows the jade seal and says they better act quickly and use it, so that his brother Tu Su dies and joins the former emperor. Now Tu Yi realizes they want him to use the imperial seal to command the entire country to kill his brother so he can't lose the throne. This way, even as king of everything, he'll still be a puppet of these two men. It's sad to know that the emperor's two most trusted people plotted all this before his body even cooled. But Tu Yi doesn't want to get involved in all this drama. Not to mention he has a beautiful spy he needs to be very careful with. He wonders what he's going to do in this whole situation. He then glances at the jade seal in Zhao Zuo's hand. He snatches it while thinking that this guy won't control him like that. The man yells, asking Tu Yi what he's talking about. The protagonist knows that if he himself dies, the Clan dynasty will become unstable, and that way, he'll complete his mission. He puts his hand on Zhao Zuo's face and says that now that he has the seal, he decides who lives or dies. Zhao Shu is confused. She never imagined he was bold enough to confront her father like this. He asks who dares to go against him, while she's frightened by his audacity. Maybe the foolish way he acted until now was all just a disguise, and now that he has the imperial seal in his hands, he holds all the power. Zhao Zuo warns him that he's being arrogant, and even before the ascension, he had the power to put him on the throne and also to take him off. Tu Yi says to just kill him. He knows this guy has 77 martial points, so it will be easy for him to be killed. The man tries to approach, saying he'll strangle him to death, while his daughter tries to tell him to calm down. At that moment, Tan Yuan steps in and tells everyone to calm down since their goal there is the same. Tu Yi notices that this guy is much calmer. To irritate him, he'd need to stir things up even more. Shan Yuan is startled and the jade seal falls to the ground. Immediately, Zhao Zuo yells, asking what he did. Acting clueless, Tu Yi apologizes, saying it slipped. He knows that this seal represents the fate and authority of the entire Qian dynasty. It's how the emperor issues commands in this world. Breaking something like this is the ultimate offense, and he knows these men won't have the patience to tolerate it. Seeing Shan Yuan fuming, he already senses that death is approaching. But Shan Yuan is using every bit of strength in his body to do nothing. Zhao Zhu then reaches out his hand, but when he's about to say something, Tian Yuan stops him, saying that His Majesty is just playing. Now that he sits on the throne, the entire world belongs to him, so a piece of jade is insignificant. What's broken is broken, and it's no big deal. Besides, it's getting late, so they would discuss this tomorrow. With that, the two start to leave, but Tu Yi calls out to them. He says that the emperor and common people are equal before the law, so he should be executed. But the two simply ignore him, and the scene shifts to a room where Zhao Zhu says they need to find a way to get rid of Tu Yi. Tian Yuan asks if he doesn't realize the consequences of eliminating the boy. Zhao Zhu says he's becoming a coward and still has the nerve to call that kid Your Majesty. But his friend steps closer and tells him to stop being foolish because Tu Su was with the troops outside. If they killed Tu Yi, they would obviously be investigated and surely executed. Unfortunately, when the boy broke the seal, they lost their greatest bargaining chip, and now the only thing they can rely on is his ascension to the throne. Confused, Zhao Zhu asks if he's suggesting that Tu Yi broke the seal on purpose to prevent them from killing his brother. Tian Yuan says he's certain of it. Before, they were competing for the throne, but now that he's already ascended, it's better for him to have a good relationship with Tu Su. Moreover, if they pressure the boy too much, he could make a deal with Tu Su to bring his military power here and wipe them both out. This way, their plan would obviously fail, and they'd both be executed, something they can't risk. At this point, Tu Yi will try to maintain a triangular relationship to control all sides. Zhao Zhu laughs and says Tian Yuan is overthinking it. That child doesn't have the brains to plan that far ahead. However, Tian Yuan brings up how Tu Yi said that the emperor and common people are equal before the law. That was a phrase spoken by the former minister Wei Xinglu 100 years ago. He rose to the top of the world alongside the emperor, but when he lost the emperor's trust, the poor man was dismembered. Quoting a phrase that perfectly fits their current situation is a clear sign of Tu Yi's intentions. Zhao Zhu replies that he won't bow to this child who only relies on his brother Tu Su's military strength. Even if the order wasn't issued with the Jade Seal, he will send someone to kill Tu Su. Tian Yuan just watches. He knows they supported Tu Yi because he seemed like the easiest one to control among all the emperor's sons. Suddenly, he starts laughing to himself, saying that the late emperor really left behind incredible descendants. The scene then shifts to our boy calmly sleeping in his bed. But in reality, he's already completely bored with this world. The food is bad, and the games are worse. The music they play is awful, and he doesn't recognize any of the characters, and there's nothing to watch. Without a phone, computer, or anything, he's going to die. However, he notices something beside him, and when he turns, it's Dear Shu. I'll just call her Shu to avoid confusing her with her father, Zhao Zuo, while she is Zhao Shu. Blushing, she says that as a servant, she must always stay close to him in his chambers. He pauses for a second and immediately turns red, saying he takes back everything he said about this place. Well, some time passes, and it seems our boy no longer even remembers what video games and phones are. I thought he'd be one of those protagonists who does nothing, but our guy is even stretching his back after all this. She then notices the suspicious hairpin she's wearing, and he already imagines this could be a perfect way for him to return to his world. Pouring a drink, he then calls out Zhao Shu's name, and asks if by any chance she's a spy sent by her father to stay by his side. Her expression changes instantly, and she mutters to herself that it's impossible she's been exposed. A bit awkwardly, she asks what he's talking about and says she doesn't understand. But he simply responds that he doesn't care about her relationship with Zhao Zuo. He takes a sip, turns away, and says he knows very well she was placed beside him to monitor him. He warns that he loves this game they're playing because being emperor without it would be too boring. However, Shu is frightened, wondering how long he's known this, and if the fact that he's revealing it now means he's tired of this game. He then takes another sip of wine and says this is truly intoxicating. He collapses onto the table, pretending to faint, thinking this is finally the perfect chance for her. Shu slowly starts removing her hairpin. Now that she's been exposed, she's lost her value to both him and her adoptive father. The only way for her to redeem herself now was to go through with this. Gradually, she approaches while he casually hums a little tune. But then the system sends a message about a point objective. These points were based on the political, economic, military, and cultural values and any other indicators of the Chan nation's success. Once the nation's total value drops below 0, the mission is considered complete. At that moment, he starts with 1,000 points. That's when the fool realizes that if he dies now, it doesn't mean the mission will be completed. The problem is, she was already closing in, ready to strike his neck, and now he doesn't want to die in such a pointless way. The girl is certain she's being tested, but she can't miss this opportunity. She decides to take the risk, but right at that moment, he turns and grabs her arm. A tear escapes her eye, thinking she's been tricked by his schemes once again. He says that was way too close, but she pulls out the hairpin and breaks free, saying she still has a chance. Only to stupidly trip and fall flat on her back. She's crying in frustration while he thinks it's ridiculous she's trying to kill him with only 44 points in martial prowess. He then snatches the hairpin from her hand and says she got way too excited over a few words. Lifting her chin, he tells her this is not how a qualified spy should act. The poor girl is crying, thinking her assassination mission has failed. Suddenly, she wakes up in a different place, wondering where she is. Someone approaches and asks if the mission she was given was completed. She turns and sees her adoptive father. He extends his hand and says that if she can't handle something so simple, she will have to be punished. She screams and suddenly she wakes up beside Tu-Yi. He asks if it was a nightmare, and she wants to know if he's going to kill her. He gets up and replies that he already said not only will he not kill her, but he'll continue playing this game and let her pass on messages. After all, that's what makes everything more interesting. She then starts dipping ink and writing an imperial decree. She keeps wondering what he's planning with that terrifying expression. She's certain he must be plotting something against her adoptive father again. But the expression is because writing with that curse brush is just too difficult. He takes a deep breath and she comments that was too fast. Humbly, he turns and asks for help writing something. Before she can respond, he's already placing his hand on her shoulder, telling her to sit there. Awkwardly, she says she doesn't know what decree he wants to write. He says it's a decree to strip all descendants of the Tu family of their surnames and reduce them to commoners. She was confused, not understanding why he's banishing his own family. She asks why a servant like her has to write something like that. Tu-Yi had asked the system for the easiest way to lose points, and it explained that it was by getting rid of the Tu family descendants. Since Tu-Su holds significant military influence, this would also make him appear as a cruel tyrant, perfect for his plan. Excitedly, he says that in this world, he'll be seen as a tyrant and make everyone attack him. He quickly asks why she's hesitating, prompting her to apologize and start writing. He then casually tells her that to satisfy her curiosity, he's doing this to make the game more difficult. Placing his hand on her face, he says that with this decree, he's now a solitary man, without family support and with the reputation of a cruel tyrant. And of course, the one to deliver this news to Zhao Zhu would be her. He tells her she can consider this information a gift. Poor Shu, having suffered so much all of her life, is receiving a gift for the first time. Tu-Yi is eager for her to carry out this task, while she knows she's being tricked but can't help enjoying it. The scene then shifts to Zhao Zhu's residence. She knocks on the door and he opens it, asking what it is. She enters and says she has information about Tu-Yi. She explains that Tu-Yi signed a decree stripping all members of the Tu family of their royal positions. The two ministers are shocked. Zhu Xiu turns to Qian Yuan, saying he had intended to place another Tu descendant in the boy's position, but this clearly ruins their plans. Qian Yuan then asks how she obtained this information. Embarrassed, she replies that His Majesty had her write the decree herself. Immediately, Zhao Zhu turns and slaps her, calling her a bastard. She falls to the ground like trash, and he asks if she let the secret leak. Crying, she insists she would never do such a thing. But he points at her, accusing her of using the boy to destroy her own father. Qian Yuan places a hand on his shoulder, telling him to calm down. He warns that if Shu had leaked the information, she wouldn't even know about the decree. Zhao Zhu pauses. He then apologizes, saying a father can act wrongly but asks not to be blamed. He turns to Qian Yuan and admits that their plan to install another prince has failed. Now it's time to proceed with their plan to gather all the courtiers and humiliate that bastard during his first court session. Qian Yuan starts to comment on the plan but then says it's fine. It's better to forget it. He knows Zhao Zhu isn't a very intelligent person, so it's better for him to plan things on his own. Back with our dear Tu-Yi with his finger in his nose thinking the decree was ready. The problem is, this is far from enough to drop the country's score to 0, so he's going to need new ideas. Then he remembers how an extremely large empire once fell. The leader had countless corrupt ministers and ignored all state affairs. But what truly led to the downfall was that he forcibly began taking women from the entire population, recruiting concubines from everyone. Considering that the most influential people here are the courtiers, he's going to steal everyone's women, which will surely make them furious and attack. He loves the plan. Not only would he lose a lot of points, but he would also benefit. It's the perfect scheme. He then turns to his servant and orders him to bring Zhao Zhu and Lai Qianyuan immediately. After a while, they arrive and he opens his arms, saying how much he missed his ministers. Qianyuan greets him respectfully. Zhao Zhu, however, sits down and tells him he should start getting familiar with the courtiers now that he's taken the throne. The chubby man is excited. If he can get the entire court against Tu-Yi, there's nothing the boy can do. Tu-Yi, however, thinks that holding such an important meeting seems like the right thing to do, which is exactly why he doesn't want to do it. He responds that it sounds like too much work and he just became emperor, so he doesn't really know how to do it properly. That's why he relies on his two trustworthy ministers. Qianyuan simply watches, realizing how clever the boy is. Refusing this request would ruin Zhao Zhu's plan, and mentioning trust made it impossible to decline. Zhao Zhu's schemes didn't stand a chance against him. Our boy smiles, thinking it's time for the concubine plan to help him lose points. He then says to leave court affairs for later because today he has something more important to discuss. It was shameful for him as emperor to have only one concubine, so he was going to recruit countless beautiful women and expand the harem. Even Zhao Zhu was impressed by how coldly the boy is making such a decision before his father's body is even cold. Qianyuan, on the other hand, is trying to understand what the boy is calculating with this harem plan. Tu-Yi sits there smiling, saying this is an extremely important matter that must be resolved quickly. Seeing the minister's faces, he knows the points will soon start dropping. Zhao Zhu agrees but says that searching for women across the world would take too long. Tu Yi says that's fine. They'll start today, but only within the capital. The chubby man is confused as to why Tu Yi is being so impatient. Meanwhile, Tianyuan suspects that mentioning the capital means the boy's real objective lies there. Suddenly, Tu Yi strokes his chin and says he has an idea that will save a lot of time and effort. They'll start by selecting women related to the court ministers. Immediately, Tianyuan is shocked. The scene shifts outside. Zhao Zhu comments that if Tu Yi truly is an idiot, he's ignoring state affairs and focusing on expanding his harem. But that's perfect. The kid is digging his own grave, so they won't need to do anything. However, suddenly Tianyuan snaps, shouting, "Enough. If he keeps underestimating his majesty like this, their families will surely be executed." Zhao Zhu looks startled as Tianyuan composes himself. He apologizes for losing his composure, but insists that the boy's harem plan is clearly a malicious strategy. First, the moment he ignored the court meeting showed he knew Zhao Zhu's intentions. Zhao Zhu argues that they had just planned this right before entering, so it's impossible for Tu Yi to know. Tianyuan says that only proves how advanced his planning is. Not only did he refuse to discuss court affairs, but creating this harem is obviously a cohesive strategy that follows another plan. Zhao Zhu, confused, asks what he means by cohesive strategies. Tianyuan explains that the boy rejected the court meeting because he's confident he can control the court without meeting them. By taking women from the courtiers' families, he gains leverage through marriage alliances with all of them. This way, both of them lose all their influence. Zhao Zhu asks what they should do now. Tianyuan smiles and says what they need to do is help the boy expand the two-family bloodline. He spreads his arms wide and says that, as loyal servants, they will give the boy the perfect opportunity to fulfill this desire. A few days later, inside the imperial hall, Tianyuan informs the prince that all his family members have lost their royal status except for his brother, who is still outside. The prince says that's not important. They can talk about that later. First, he wants to know how the selection is going. Tianyuan reports that the ministers did everything they could to fulfill his command, but time was limited. Tu Yi claps his hands and tells him to take a look. The curtains open, revealing a legion of women before him. The boy is literally drooling, saying that this is truly paradise. All the women begin paying their respects to his majesty. Tu Yi sneaks up behind Tianyuan and asks if any of these concubines particularly enjoy combat behind closed doors. A bit confused, Tianyuan says he doesn't quite understand what he means. Tu Yi finds it odd. Clearly, even if the man doesn't grasp his words, the context should explain itself. Meanwhile, Tianyuan wonders if the prince is starting to suspect something. Among the concubines he brought, all are from influential families, except for two women. The one in red is Fantashu, and the one in purple is Yu Sha. About a decade ago, when the emperor ruled the Qian dynasty, the families of these two girls offended him and were completely wiped out. On impulse, Tianyuan saved the two girls from execution. For the past decade, he has kept their identities secret and raised them by his side. They inherited the ancient talents of their families, making them perfect pawns in his hands. In a private room, Tianyuan calls for Tao Zhu and Sha. He informs them that the Qian emperor who had their families executed is now dead. However, since they couldn't take revenge personally, he asks if they still hold resentment. They reply they are willing to die 1,000 times in the name of vengeance. For Tianyuan, this was the perfect chance to place them beside the prince without raising suspicion. With a sparkle in his eye, Tu Yi remarks how those two stand out. Man, their body types are kind of unbalanced compared to each other, aren't they? He thinks. But Tianyuan starts sweating, wondering if the boy has already noticed. The system revealed all their talents, that Xu Xie was adopted by Tianyuan and intends to kill him and destroy the nation. Obviously, Fantashu has different attributes, but her goal is the same. Tu Yi thinks Tianyuan made the perfect move by sending these two. A snake and a scorpion right next to the tyrant, destined to help bring down the country. He approaches them, smiles, and says they're exceptional, asking for their names. One of the girls introduces herself, and Tu Yi moves closer to Sha, commenting that she seems a bit nervous. Tianyuan is drenched in sweat, fearing her introverted nature might expose her true intentions. Tu Yi lifts her chin gently, telling her not to be afraid, assuring her he's very calm and approachable. He keeps teasing until she suddenly says she can't take it anymore. Out of nowhere, she collapses, seemingly fainting. What the system didn't mention is that Sha has difficulty controlling her emotions when touched and faints out of embarrassment. Tu Yi stares in shock while Tianyuan looks even more terrified. All Tu Yi wanted was to show interest in the girl Tianyuan brought. He didn't expect her tolerance for physical contact to be so low, ruining his presentation. Now Tianyuan fears her identity might be exposed and will likely try to replace her. Falling to his knees, Tianyuan apologizes, admitting it was a terrible mistake to include this woman in the selection. He says he deserves to die and will remove her immediately. But Tu Yi raises his hand and says that won't be necessary. He lifts her into his arms, smirking, saying he quite likes women who can't handle a little touch. Tianyuan's choices had pleased him. Fantashu silently thinks this tyrant really is a pervert. Tianyuan wipes his face and thanks his majesty. Meanwhile, Tu Yi casually decides that tonight she would serve him in bed. Fantasia stands by, silently vowing that he will soon pay for all of this. Suddenly, Chuyi glances at her and both seem confused. He wonders why she seems so displeased. Maybe she's also eager to serve him tonight. He then declares that tonight the three of them will join him. Without wasting time, the scene transitions to the bedroom. Looking at the two, Chuyi comments that among the palace beauties, they truly are the most stunning. Not to mention, the system warned that they're getting closer to him with the goal of destroying the country, which is perfect. They also have numerous strong attributes, having been trained by Tianyuan. The only issue is that Chuyi only knows their basic information. He has no clue what their actual skills are or if they could help in bringing down the kingdom. Fantasia glances back, wondering what this tyrant is thinking. The two girls exchange looks, determined to sacrifice themselves for their cause. They assume they'll use every method to humiliate them and force them to submit to his tyranny. Back in the present moment, Chuyi suddenly says the time has come. But he just stands there staring, making Fantasia even more anxious. He specifically requested both of them, which was suspicious. They remember Tianyuan saying he prepared the perfect way to hide their identities, so that shouldn't be an issue. However, they need to be careful since 2D is extremely cunning and not easily deceived by beauty. Plus, he has Miss Shu, who is not only their ally but also a rival. If they want to earn his trust, they need to prove they're worth more than just their appearance. Chuyi steps closer and asks if they know how to do that. Back to the present, Chuyi asks what the two were thinking so deeply about. He says he'll ask once more if they have any special talents or abilities. This was the moment they had been waiting for, as Tianyuan had instructed. Xia then speaks up, saying she's skilled in predicting parts of the future, stargazing and script analysis. She also has talent with talismans, feng shui, healthcare, medicine, and alchemy. Chuyi is genuinely impressed. And finally, she mentions she has experience in more intimate skills behind closed doors. However, Fantasia finds it ironic she would say that after fainting from a simple touch. Chuyi then turns to Fantasia and asks what she knows. Fantasia notices from his expression that he isn't satisfied with Shay's answer. A key detail is that she comes from a family of merchants. Since childhood, she was involved in negotiations alongside her grandfather. Because of these environments, she became skilled in finance, calculations, and understanding human nature. However, her grandfather taught her that such skills could raise suspicion among the powerful. She must seek revenge while preserving herself. In other words, she needs to show her value while appearing innocent. So she tells Tuvi that she's a weak woman with no special abilities, talents, or powers. She decides not to reveal her financial skills or knowledge of human behavior. Trying to appear like an innocent young lady, she says she came from a wealthy family, but her parents have passed away. The only thing she has left is the wealth they left behind. Tuyi wonders if this girl is basically Batman, an orphan, rich, and left behind. But analyzing the situation, he sees a way to make them help destroy the country. He then asks her how. As the ruler of the nation, he should be interested in her wealth. He suggests it might be a good idea to put her in charge of the national treasury. Immediately, she is startled by the suggestion. Tuyi's plan is that, considering she's a spoiled girl from a rich family, she must be terrible at managing money. Putting her in charge of finances is the perfect way to trigger an economic collapse. Then he turns to Shet and says that since she's talented in studies, he'll appoint her as the national teacher. Additionally, she'll be responsible for his longevity through alchemy. Sha is utterly shocked by this offer. He's certain that if she manages medical affairs, a lot of people will end up poisoned. Then he adds that now that she's the national teacher, he always wants to see her in a Taoist robe. All because he thinks cosplay is pretty cool. Sha is terrified while Tuyi's nose is bleeding from excitement. The scoundrel is already imagining that if there's going to be cosplay, it should be in abundance. Having a cosplay harem in this martial world isn't such a bad idea. The scene shifts to the Azuo study house. This time, Tuyi is writing an imperial edict. It also seems like he's crafted a somewhat fake replica of the Jade Seal. Apparently, what he wrote is a scheme to kill Tu Su. Once his brother dies, the vile Tuyi will have a way to deal with the others. Suddenly, he tells someone to enter. General Zhao Xin appears, awaiting orders. The chubby emperor hands him the decree and orders him to go to Lintong City and deliver it to Tu Su. He must personally witness Tu Su taking his own life and bring back his head. The general simply acknowledges the order. Outside on the rooftop, someone sends a message through an eagle to inform Lord Xiao. The eagle flies across the moon, revealing an army advancing through the forest. However, a cloaked group perches among the treetops, with the eagle landing on someone's shoulder. A girl wearing a butterfly mask tells them to prepare. But she's not the brightest and stumbles, falling and screaming for everyone to move. She crashes to the ground, and it seems this happens often since the others say they're getting used to it. Lying awkwardly in the bushes, she orders them to attack. Zhao Xin, riding his horse, suddenly notices a rope below. He tries to change direction, but it's too late, and everyone falls off. One knight tries to stand but is struck from behind. Assassins descend from the trees, throwing kunai at him. Ahead, another warns that Lord Xiao ordered no one to escape. Zhao Xin demands to know how rebels dare intercept an imperial decree. The figure stands still for a moment before lunging forward, cutting down two soldiers. But that he sees wings ahead, and from above, a voice taunts him, asking if that's all he can do. In an instant, she's behind him with a blade at his neck. Zhao Xin declares they are members of the Kun Guard. Without responding, the woman finishes him off and one of the men retrieves a box. He announces that, as expected, the imperial decree was found on this man. Lord Xiao confirms it's the decree ordering Prince Tu-Su to commit suicide, undoubtedly sent by that cruel ruler. One soldier hesitates, asking if they're going too far by stopping an imperial decree. Something swiftly flies past his head. Xiao reminds him of the true mission of the Kun Guard. They operate in the shadows to protect the late Emperor Chen Zheng's will. They act ruthlessly, using the bloodiest methods. But they must not forget the old alliance with the Emperor. An Emperor who, before his death, declared Tu-Su as the crown prince. It is their duty to ensure that this happens. However, Tu Yi not only stole the throne, but was also trying to kill Tu-Su. Xiao destroys the decree and declares that this proves it. The new Emperor is an enemy the Kun Guard must eliminate. She orders the area to be cleared and ensures no information leaks. Tu-Su is still far to the north, and even on horseback, it would take him at least 4 days to return. During this time, Tu Yi wouldn't know whether the decree succeeded or not. And before this could be exposed, Xiao plans to kill Tu Yi. Back with Tu Yi, coughing after that death vow, he wonders which of the lovely ladies is thinking so much about him. 5 days later, we return to the two residents. He still hasn't received any news. Obviously not. The messenger was killed. Shan Yuan approaches and asks what he's waiting for. Tu Yi casually responds that he's not waiting for anything and questions why Tan Yuan took so long. Shan Yuan raises a finger and says he brings good news and bad news. Zhao Zhu interrupts, asking what could be worse than their current situation. Shan Yuan calmly explains that their plan to forge the imperial decree and kill Tu-Su has failed. Zhao Zhu is shocked and grabs him, accusing him of speaking nonsense. But Shan Yuan slaps his hand away and reminds Zhao Zhu that they're on the same sides, so he should stop pretending. He reveals that Zhao Xin was intercepted outside the city 5 days ago, and the one who killed him was none other than the Kun Guard's leader, Xiao. The chubby man is confused, wondering why the late Emperor's secret unit is getting involved. Shan Yuan assures him to wait for the good news. Xiao, who killed Zhao Xin, believes Tu Yi sent the decree, making him her next target. Zhao Zhu celebrates but then pauses. He questions how Tian Yuan knows this when the Kun Guard operates independently. Shan Yuan simply says he has his methods and that Zhao Zhu shouldn't worry about it. They got lucky this time and must seize the opportunity. This was the perfect chance to restore the balance they desperately needed, especially since His Majesty is hosting a grand banquet today with many guests. If Xiao wanted to strike, tonight was the perfect moment. As Xiao leaps under the moonlight, Tian Yuan notes that the guard is weakened, ensuring their plan's success. Even if the assassination fails, Tu Yi would grow to hate his brother, shattering the balance. Zhao Zhu cheers, saying that way Tu Yi would be killed and Tu-Su would take the blame. Shan Yuan agrees this would be the perfect outcome, but now it's up to fate. Zhao Zhu wonders how such a plan could possibly fail. But Shan Yuan is already leaving, saying he only came to inform them and asks to be excused. As he descends the stairs, he ponders that the only factor he can't predict is how His Majesty will react. Moreover, the two girls he placed beside Tu Yi despise him, and tonight would be their perfect chance to strike. But no matter how skilled they are, could they outsmart His Majesty? All he hopes is that he's not being overly paranoid. Meanwhile, in the palace hall, Tu Yi's cosplay banquet has begun. Right in the middle, Qian King stands out. He is dressed as Nezuko and Tao Zhu as Saber, or so it seems. The girls compliment each other while others chat with them. Apparently, the participants are competing for Tu Yi's attention. Some even regret not wearing something more modest. A soft step echoes through the hall. Lady Xiao, the Kun Guard leader, has arrived. Thinking that this ruler truly is a shameless pervert with bizarre tastes, she surveys the hall. However, she wonders what's happening since none of the women seem to have any martial prowess. Yet the competitive gazes among the harem candidates are sharp and intimidating. She overhears two women whispering that wearing such revealing clothes must mean she's full of ambition. A woman in green compliments Xiao's outfit, calling it creative. But in the harem competition, family background mattered most. Xiao feels like killing all these women but restrains herself. Her target is someone else. Suddenly, the crowd cheers as His Majesty arrives. Tu Yi enters in style. Turns out the girls in cosplay weren't Xia and Tao Zhu but other competitors. He blows a kiss, declaring his love for all of them. Smiling, they respond that they love him too. But Tu Yi quickly notices something peculiar. Of course, it's Xiao. The system already flagged her as the Kun Guard leader and a supporter of Tu-Su. Immediately, Xiao senses his gaze on her and wonders if she's been discovered. She discreetly reaches for a kunai, thinking it's time to end this pervert. Suddenly, she shouts to His Majesty and leaps toward him, declaring it's time to face death. The other women gasp, questioning how she dares speak that way before His Majesty. They start wondering if this is the true essence of this cosplay banquet. 5 days earlier, Tu Yi had gathered all the women to inform them about the upcoming competition. Naturally, one of them asked what exactly a cosplay banquet was. He casually explained it was just an event where they would wear various outfits, play games, and have fun with him. Now it all made sense. The sisters thought Xiao was just acting like an assassin to impress him. Xiao charged forward, declaring he would die, but 2D simply blew her a heart-shaped kiss. One of the women annoyed grumbled that this wretched woman was pretending to be an assassin, knowing full well that danger excites men. Xiao glanced sideways and saw Yuta leaping at her, determined not to let Xiao win with a stunt like that. Xiao grabbed her by the arm and slammed her to the ground. Confused, Xiao wondered if these women were all insane. They had no cultivation yet dared to attack her. Maybe this was the true essence of this so-called roleplay. Suddenly, all the women rushed at Xiao, declaring they wouldn't let her steal their spotlight. They grabbed her, pulling her away, insisting they must protect his majesty from a lunatic like her. Being pushed around, Xiao couldn't understand why these women were fighting so fiercely for this man. But gripping her dagger tightly, she decided if this was their choice, she wouldn't show mercy. Seeing Xiao prepare to strike, 2D panicked. These women were vital resources for his role as a tyrant. He quickly ordered her to stop and spare the girls. Xiao muttered to herself that this perverted ruler was bold to speak to her like that. She then asked if he was willing to die for them. The women smiled and confidently said they were willing to die for him. But Tu Yi knew he couldn't die yet. The nation still had too many points. He apologized, explaining his time to die hadn't come. Xiao scoffed that his words were empty, but Tu Yi stepped closer and promised to abdicate the throne to Tu Su. He knew she was there to assassinate him and pave the way for Tu Su to ascend. Xiao wondered if he already knew her identity and whether this was all a trap. She demanded to know his true intentions. Raising his arms, Tu Yi admitted he was tired of pretending. His only goal was to be a lazy and incompetent ruler. The throne meant nothing compared to a harem full of beautiful women, and he was willing to give it up to someone more capable. The system immediately notified him that this speech had triggered a story route where the nation would be destroyed. The conditions for this event required a massive army outside the capital and him abdicating the throne to a general. If his plan succeeded, he would lose 1,000 points, dropping him to 0. While Xiao suspected he was lying, she also knew that no one in this world could resist such power, especially a pervert like him. She coldly told him to forget it. Whether he was serious or not, she would kill him and hand the throne to Tu Su. Tu Yi, confused by her relentless desire to kill him, tried to strengthen his persuasion. He warned that if he died here, Tu Su's reputation would be tarnished, and he wouldn't be seen as a legitimate emperor. Everything he was doing was out of love for his brother. Xiao seemed moved, triggering a flashback of the late emperor. He'd once asked Xiao if, after pacifying the north, he had become a good emperor. She replied that with his knowledge and military talent, he would be remembered as a wise ruler for generations. However, he lamented that his talent was only suited for conquest, and such a ruler wasn't needed in this dynasty's future. Xiao assured him that an emperor like him would always be necessary. Yet he simply turned away, admitting he knew his time was short, a fact that wasn't necessarily bad for the dynasty. What he wanted was a successor who didn't need to be talented, even someone lazy or careless, as long as they were tolerant and sought peace over success and greed. Hearing this, Xiao always believed the true successor should be Prince Tu Su. But based on the late emperor's words, Tu Yi seemed to fit that role more. Shaken, Xiao scolded herself, refusing to be swayed by a few words. The rightful heir to the dynasty was Tu Su, the legitimate son. She vowed to take Tu Yi to Tu Su and let him decide his fate. She ordered Tu Yi to come with her to Lintong City to perform the abdication ceremony. For Tu Yi, this was perfect. With the system's warning, the story was heading in the right direction. But suddenly, someone blocked their path. It was Yu Sha, holding a glowing talisman, demanding to know what right Xiao had to abduct the emperor. Sha radiated a purple aura, surprising everyone. Xiao, realizing everything Tu Yi said might have been a ploy, grew tense. She tightened her grip on her dagger, cursing the tyrant for toying with people's hearts. Yet despite seeming to have a grand plan, Tu Yi was utterly confused. He wondered what kind of situation he had just gotten himself into. Tao Zhu reassures Tu Yi not to worry, claiming Xiao's talisman abilities are incredible. She insists Xiao won't lose to that assassin, and with both of them protecting him, he won't be taken anywhere. But Tu Yi wonders when he ever asked these girls to protect him. Flashback to a few nights earlier. Tian Yuan is seen talking to the two girls. He asks if they know their true mission after getting close to Tu Yi in the palace. Xiao confidently replies that she plans to find the right moment to kill that perverted tyrant and avenge her family. However, Tian Yuan explains that many people have died, but killing him once isn't enough. Their primary mission is to bring complete destruction to the entire dynasty. For now, they must ensure Tu Yi stays alive. Both girls are confused by this. Tian Yuan clarifies that Tu Yi always appeared incompetent and foolish. That's why Tian Yuan helped him ascend to the throne while Tu Su was leading the army. Apparently, Tian Yuan revealed the entire story. Xiao asks if she's supposed to become a concubine and manipulate Tu Yi into actions that will destroy the Qian dynasty. Tian Yuan confirms that's exactly it, but he warns that was only the initial plan. After taking the throne, Tu Yi changed completely. His incompetence and idiocy were merely a disguise, making him much harder to predict. That's why, for now, they must stay close to him and discover his true weakness. Xiao was startled. It's the first time she's seen Tian Yuan this serious. She can't tell if he's afraid or excited. Shan Yuan then addresses Fan Tao Zhu, praising her intelligence and trusting she'll adapt quickly. Xiao, skilled in talismans and alchemy, is strong in combat but simple-minded. Their combined strengths make them perfect for executing the most important part of the plan. Tu Yi must never stand beside Prince Tu Su. Back in the present, Fan Tao Zhu chuckles, saying Qian Yuan was right. Tu Yi's act of incompetence was only a facade. He knew Xiao was a woman from the Kungar and created this bizarre cosplay event to lure her in. Once she got close, he crafted the perfect chance to make her take him to Tu Su, setting the stage for revenge against the ministers. What Tu Yi didn't know was that Qian Yuan had already anticipated this and planted them both by his side. Tu Yi, trying to stop Xiao from continuing the duel, grows frustrated as Tao Zhu giggles. Suddenly, he notices something odd and glances back. Tao Zhu starts whistling, pretending to mind her own business. But Tu Yi immediately realizes what's going on. Since both girls were sent by Qian Yuan, they won't let him abdicate the throne to Tu Su. The problem is that this event was perfect for Tu Yi to destroy the empire, so he needed to find a way to control Xiao. His expression changes as he remembers Xiao's greatest weakness. As Xiao steps back to compose herself, Tu Yi sneaks up behind her and grabs her waist. Lifting her chin, he declares that a supreme leader like him couldn't rely on concubines for protection. Xiao immediately turns red, tries to speak, but faints. Tu Yi smirks and tells Xiao to seize the opportunity now that it's presented itself. Xiao pauses, confused. Clearly, there had to be more tricks from this tyrant. Tu Yi urges her to move, asking what she's waiting for. With little choice, Xiao decides to capture him first and figure things out later. Tu Yi celebrates, finally getting what he wanted. But as he approaches, Xiao collapses. Unbeknownst to Tu Yi, Xiao has a hidden trait. When she completely loses consciousness from physical contact, any woman who touches the man who caused it becomes her mortal enemy. Xiao regains herself, glaring at the other girls. She slowly approaches, radiating a dark aura. Though hesitant, she crosses her hands and performs a jutsu. Activating a third-level fire spell, a flame appears in her hand, forming a massive fireball. Xiao is startled and Tao Zhu watches in shock. Tu Yi panics, realizing that if Xiao dies, his entire plan will fall apart. He rushes forward, pushing Xiao aside, yelling for her to get out of the way. At that moment, Xiao unleashes her attack, causing a massive explosion in the palace. And somehow, they kiss. Wait, what? Is this a 2003 anime? Xiao turns as red as a tomato, ready to yell at him, but slams her head on the floor and faints. Smoke rises, leaving both of them sprawled out. Tao Zhu stands stunned until Tu Yi suddenly appears. The system alerts him that the current event has failed. However, a new event, Circle of the Pillar, has been activated. This event triggers when an assassin attempts to kill him inside the main hall and a third person proficient in medicine tries to protect him. Tu Yi knows that if he defeats the assassin in the event, he will gain 1,000 national power points. At that moment, Tu Yi is devastated. What kind of nonsense is this? Why is it called destruction of the country if I'm gaining 1,000 points? Nearby, Tao Zhu watches everything, stunned by his aura. Despite both experts fainting, he seems untouched. She begins to understand why Tan Yuan feared this version of Tu Yi. Later in the room, Xiao starts to wake up. The maniac approaches her, and she seems confused. She sits up, asks where she is, and he casually tells her it's his room. Noticing she's changed, she accuses him of being a shameless pervert. Tu Yi looks perplexed as she declares he'll never have her body. He rolls his eyes, saying she's losing her mind and points out that if it weren't for him, she would have died at Tian Yuan's hands. Shortly after the fight between the two began, someone kicked the door open. It was Tian Yuan, entering with his army and ordering them to kill the assassin and protect his majesty. He approached Tu Yi, knelt, and apologized, saying that for the risk Tu Yi had taken, he deserved to die. Tu Yi told him it was fine, since he was unharmed. Shan Yuan then offered to take the assassin to discover who was behind all of this. Tu Yi suddenly shouted for him not to do such a thing. Awkwardly, he tried to come up with an excuse. He picked up the assassin in his arms and said that since she was quite beautiful, he wanted her company. Shan Yuan, confused, warned him that the assassin was very dangerous and not good to keep around. Tu Yi replied that this only made things more exciting. Besides, did Shan Yuan think he couldn't handle a woman without weapons and immobilized? Shan Yuan lowered his head and assured him he'd never think such a thing. Tu Yi then ordered Zhu to watch over the sister. Calling for Shu, he dismissed everyone else. Now, deep in thought, he knew that the initial mission had failed. However, keeping the assassin alive could be advantageous since she might return to Tu Su and help destroy the nation. Xiao told him he was standing too close and declared that she could be killed or tortured, just not endure such proximity. She pushed his head away, reminding him that she had already killed the messenger meant to execute Tu Su, so he should just kill her. She added that Tu Su would soon arrive to deal with him. Tu Yi, unaware of this, asked when he had sent someone to kill his brother. She told him to stop pretending because she knew about the message he had sent. Shu, however, recognized it as her adoptive father's doing. Tu Yi, noticing Xiao's expression, deduced that if she knew something, it was likely her adoptive father. For him, this was perfect. It's a chance to fuel even more hatred against Tu Su. Xiao, startled, watched as 2D put his hand to his head and let out a Joker-like laugh, claiming he had just remembered the decree he sent. She was confused as to why he would admit to such a thing. 2D walked to the wall, grabbed a sword, and declared that his brother controlled a mighty army, which should be left to him. She wondered why His Majesty wanted to take full responsibility for everything. 2D explained that sending a decree to have his brother killed would have been too boring. He intended to deal with him in a far more entertaining way. Xiao was shocked as 2D made a sudden swing, but of course he cut the chains. Xiao asked why he wasn't killing her. He replied that since she killed the messenger, she now had to deliver the new decree. He explained that their father trained Tusu to be a hero and take the throne, but to him, Tusu was just a brute with strength and nothing to fear. With a smirk, 2D announced that not only would he strip his brother of his titles and positions, but he would also make him a commoner. Xiao, looking startled and poorly drawn, almost as if her eyes were 3 meters apart, could hardly believe her ears. 2D told her to deliver the message to her brother, and if he disagreed with the decision, to come and reclaim what was rightfully his. 2D said he'd be waiting for him personally in the capital. Ecstatic with his performance, 2D was convinced Xiao would now hate him and deliver the message to Tusu. But then the system activated the rebellion arc from the story routes. For this story to begin, the capital needed to have a prince with powerful troops. The system user, as emperor, had to issue an order to strip the prince of his powers. If the prince rebelled during this first phase, the host would lose 1,000 points. If the prince eventually stormed the castle and destroyed the entire place, the host would lose 10,000 points. Tuyu was thrilled. Losing 10,000 points would definitely put him in the negatives. Meanwhile, Xiao, watching him, thought this prince was unhinged. Perhaps this was a good thing, as it gave Tusu a greater chance of reclaiming the throne. Tuyi calmly let the woman leave. She wondered why His Majesty not only let the assassin escape but also took all the blame for her father's actions. Tuyi, no fool, began to understand how things worked. He couldn't rely solely on the system's events, as the last time, he ended up gaining points. He needed to make better use of the ministers around him. Looking at Shu, he remembered her father suggesting that court meeting. Feeling observed, she was unsure of what was happening until Tuyi called her by name. He apologizes for having given so much attention to Tao Zhu and Sha. Shu responds that hearing something like that from him is terrifying. He approaches and tells her to relax, reminding her that he already said she could tell her father anything she wanted. And this time, he wanted her to send another message to him. She was to inform him that Tuyi would participate in the court meeting he wanted to arrange, so he just needed to set the date. Shu agreed, and with that, the next day arrived. Everyone was already gathered in the middle of the hall when Zhu's arrival was announced. People greeted him, and the chubby man entered cheerfully, thanking them for their compliments and saying there was no need for formalities. However, he noticed that people didn't seem very enthusiastic, which he found odd. He quickly realized that Tianyuan's seat was empty. A man approached and informed him that Tianyuan had sent word that he wasn't feeling well. Zhao Zhu thought to himself that Tianyuan was underestimating his plans. He turned to the messenger and said that Tianyuan indeed should take better care of his health, so it was fine that he wasn't present today. However, Zhao Zhu had already made up his mind. Today, he would first assert his authority over Tuyi in court and then deal with Tianyuan. Then another announcement was made. The emperor had arrived. Zhao Zhu turned and everyone bowed. Tuyi entered with Shu by his side. People whispered, wondering since when an emperor attended court accompanied by his concubines. It was against protocol. Tuyi turned and said that if they couldn't handle just one concubine, they were in serious trouble. That's when they started to panic, placing their hands on their heads upon seeing what was coming next. Of course, he had brought all the palace women with him. While some fainted, others wept for the late emperor. The women curiously asked if this was the great court assembly, tugging at the beards of the old ministers. Laughing, Tuyi said the girls were interested in experiencing this, so he was sure no one would oppose it. Zhao Zhuo, however, wondered if the boy had lost his mind doing something like this. Another minister was horrified, saying even the maiden his family had sent was standing there, which was disgraceful. He asked His Majesty if he had brought them to court just to humiliate them. Zhao Zhu pointed out that bringing a harem into a place like this was against protocol. Tuyi calmly told them not to worry, saying he had no ulterior motives. He was just a foolish leader wanting to enjoy his harem wherever he went. Zhao Zhu didn't know how to respond. Tuyi knew that as long as he was direct and shameless, there was nothing they could do. He then turned to one of the ministers and asked if they weren't going to prepare seats for everyone. With that, small wooden stools were placed on the floor. The women sat down, saying they wanted to be closer to the throne, and Tuyi promised to arrange things better next time. At that moment, the system notified him that he was breaking the country's customs and etiquette, resulting in a loss of 500 points. He was thrilled, causing chaos in court was the best strategy. Obviously, his current plan was to break all dignity and lose as many points as possible. Zhao Zhu thought to himself that for now he had to endure this humiliation, but soon the boy would learn his lesson. Tuyi then asked if any ministers had anything to report to him. The ministers knew that the drama was about to begin since Lord Zhao would make a move against the young emperor. Zhao Zhu stepped forward and said he had something to report. He claimed that some interesting signs had appeared on East Island and that he had come to present them. Tu-Yi asked what those signs were, and the chubby man chuckled. He said the sign was none other than the sacred beast, the Azure Dragon. Honestly, though, that Azure Dragon looked more green than blue. The elder claimed this symbol represented the growth of the Qian dynasty. Tu-Yi glanced sideways, not looking too excited about it. Zhao Zhu wondered why the boy didn't seem thrilled by such a favorable omen. Could it be that his plan was already being discovered? He suggested that Tu-Yi should personally examine the divine beast. Clapping his hands, Zhao Zhu ordered it to be brought in. A green paw stepped into the hall, causing panic. The ministers tried to avoid it. Tu-Yi, however, appeared curious. Two men entered, struggling to lead a monstrous creature resembling a crocodile, stopping it in front of Tu-Yi. Tu-Yi burst into laughter, questioning if that was supposed to be a divine Azure Dragon. Clearly, it was just a dyed dragon-like creature. Zhao Zhu insisted Tu-Yi admire the majestic nature of the dragon. Meanwhile, he anxiously awaited the boy's reaction to the spirit beast. At that moment, one of the system's special events activated. For this event to trigger, someone related to the throne had to present a beast as a gift. At the same time, the beast presented had to be part of a lie. Essentially, they had to claim it was one creature when it was actually something else. To complete the event and lose 2,000 points, Tu-Yi had to be convinced by the ministers that this was the real beast. Tu-Yi smiled, thinking Zhao Zhu always brought interesting surprises. Now was time for his next performance. The massive dragon opened its mouth as Tu-Yi stood there observing. The handlers struggled to control it while some ministers couldn't help but laugh. At that moment, Tu-Yi comments that this so-called Azure Dragon doesn't look very real. But that was exactly what Zhao Zhu wanted, and now it was time to start manipulating him. Tu-Yi then says that it must surely be an Azure Dragon and asks if the ministers agree that it's a divine beast. Of course, that was Zhao Zhu's plan all along, and immediately, the other ministers began to agree. One even pulled out a book claiming that his ancestors had seen an Azure Dragon and it looked identical to this one. Everyone congratulated Zhao Zhu, saying that receiving such a beast was a blessing. This was Zhao Zhu's strategy to turn all the ministers against Tu-Yi and gradually strip away his influence. However, for Tu-Yi, who wanted to lose those 2,000 points, this was absolutely perfect. But just as he was about to praise it, someone blurted out that the creature was disgusting. Confused, he asked who had said that. Then he saw it was one of the girls from his harem. She said that creatures so ugly could never be the magnificent Azure Dragon. Tu-Yi trembled, wondering why these women were getting involved at such a critical moment. Trying to fix the situation, he called Shu. He asked if she wanted to say something about this situation. But Shu was completely confused, not understanding what he expected her to say. He told her he wanted to hear if she thought the creature in the middle of the hall was a true Azure Dragon. Shu hesitated. The Emperor had always allowed her to act as a spy for Zhao Zhu. So why, at this moment, was he asking her to choose a side? Maybe, in the end, she posed no threat to him. He kept giving her chances to choose between him and her adoptive father. At that moment, she remembered how he had been constantly close to Tao Zhu and She lately. With that, her decision was made. She looked at Zhao Zhu. He was already anxious, confident that his adoptive daughter would support his plans. But then she asked how something so hideous could be considered a sacred beast. Zhao Zhu was stunned. She then shouted, asking if Zhao Zhu was trying to deceive the Emperor, which was clearly an act of treason. Zhao Zhu hadn't expected to be betrayed in a moment like this. Meanwhile, Tu-Yi wondered why she hadn't betrayed him. He rolled his eyes, trying to understand why she suddenly decided to turn on her father. Excited, she turned to the other women and asked if they agreed with her. All the women began shouting that the four-legged creature clearly wasn't a dragon. Such treason from Zhao Zhu deserved execution. Zhao Zhu was in shock. He turned to Lord Xia and claimed that it was his illegitimate daughter, sent to the palace, who had instigated this. Lord Xia rolled up his sleeves and shouted, calling her insolent. He questioned what he had taught her and how she dared to be so rude to Lord Zhao. But from among the women, his illegitimate daughter called him the insolent one. After all, the Qian dynasty didn't belong to Zhao Zhu. Moreover, she had only been sent to serve the emperor because she was illegitimate and her father had no trust in the boy, thus discarding her. Lord Xia was stunned by the harsh words of his illegitimate daughter. The other ministers asked if Lord Xia was all right. He struggled to understand how his daughter had become so disloyal. Meanwhile, the women seemed to be plotting something. One of them spoke up, revealing that her father was laundering the city's money and mistreating the people. Another told Tu-Yi that her father was forcibly occupying others' lands. Soon, all the women in the harem began denouncing their families to Tu-Yi. Zhao Zhu was trying to understand how they were losing to the harem in this court. Clearly, Chan Yuan had been right, and he should never have underestimated this child. Zhao Zhu glared at Tu-Yi, seeing him behind his intimidating harem. Tu-Yi was already pulling out a knife, and now Zhao Zhu was terrified. He wondered if this emperor was truly the chosen one. Tu-Yi took a step forward, and in Zhao Zhu's eyes, it was as if a golden dragon was approaching. The chubby guy keeps wondering if he would really die because of a woman's influence being used against him. Tu-Yi actually seems to have struck with his sword, while Zhao Zhu just stands there. The entire hall is shocked, and the women all cover their mouths with their hands. Wow, the guy had killed the Komodo dragon, or isn't that the so-called celestial dragon? Then he approaches Lord Zhao. He says it's not worth damaging their relationship over a silly creature like that. He didn't need to worry because no matter how strong it was, he would cut it down just like that. He tells everyone it would be better to pretend today's court meeting never happened. Then he asks Lord Zhao what he thinks about that. The chubby guy is holding back from saying something but only says that His Majesty is right. However, sometime later he's devastated since the system calculated that he successfully completed the event. Since Zhao Zu's plans failed, he increased his authority within the court. With that, he gained another 2,000 points, totaling 2,900. The poor guy looks at his hand, saying it's all his fault for bringing that Dan harem. In the background, Shu wonders why he didn't seem happy and how he managed to intimidate Zhao Zhuo. Then he approaches and asks if she's satisfied with her performance. He pauses for a second, turns with a sinister smile, and says it was okay. However, it would have been better if she had understood his true intentions, that Shu has something wrong in her head. He understands that she did the right thing, but she should have done it without needing any kind of signal from him. However, His Majesty need not worry because next time she would act proactively. The problem for Tu Yi is that he completely destroyed Zhao Zu's reputation, so that guy won't be able to help him lose points anymore. Now he can only rely on old Shan Yuan. He then asks for help again to draft an imperial edict. Shu immediately wants to know what his plans are this time. He says that this time they would promote Tan Yuan to the position of Grand Chancellor. He asks if she has any issues with that, and instantly she's already seated, writing. She knows that the position of Grand Chancellor is above all ministers. Since the founding of the Great Kaiyuan Empire, only a man named Weixing Liu held that position over 100 years ago. And now that Zhao Zhu has lost his power, Tam Yuan has been placed in this role. She wonders if this is some kind of plan to do something against him as well. Perhaps it's a strategy to make the two of them turn against each other. He then stamps the paper with a seal. However, suddenly, he freezes when a system message appears, saying that his brother had gathered troops in Beijing. The first stage of the Jin Rebellion event is complete, and he loses 2,000 points, leaving him with 900. Immediately, he starts laughing like a maniac, saying that these damn court points are all disappearing. He begins stamping the seal, laughing like a lunatic. The scene then shifts to a battlefield full of dead soldiers half a month later. It's the southern battlefront, and many supplies are being looted. A guy punctures a cart, and a liquid spills out. He informs everyone that these were military provisions, so they no longer need to worry about supplies. Nearby, there's a man on horseback with a red streak in his hair. The army commander named Wang Zhan approaches and addresses him as Your Majesty. He says they've been advancing through the south for 10 days without encountering any royal troops, making their progress smooth. However, recently the battles against Longxing troops have been too easy, and he's starting to suspect a trap. The man with the red streak tells him to explain properly. The man explains that the Longxing troops are regularly commanded by Lai Qianyuan. They aren't the strongest, but they are considered elite. However, instead of fighting, they simply abandoned the supplies and fled this place. The men are all carrying supplies, and the guy says that General Wang seems to be right. I think it's Hunik Xiaolai who says that Tu Yi is very cunning and despicable. Surely he was plotting something alongside Tian Yuan. The guy laughs and says he knows this was all on purpose. It was obvious he understood his own brother's strategies. Look who's arriving now, folks. The scene then changes to a strange house where an old man sits and asks his distant friend what the next line is. The child seems to be searching for the continuation of the phrase about a friend coming from afar. After thinking, he says that a friend coming from afar must be punished. The old man smacks him on the head and says that for a crown prince, he was very dumb, so it was impossible to entrust the dynasty to him. However, the boy tells his father that his brain works perfectly since yesterday he clashed heads with several soldiers and came out unscathed. The father, however, remains silent and only says that today he has no right to eat. Besides that, he must copy the lessons 100 times. Collapsing on the table, the boy mutters to himself that he wishes he could eat something, until someone throws a stone at his head. It's the protagonist calling out to Tu Su, asking if he got scolded by the old man again, and says he doesn't understand how his brother, the crown prince, lives a harder life than he does. Tu Su turns and says that's exactly why he invites him. Tu Su's father had great expectations for his name and wanted him to be remembered as a wise commander. Tu Yi says that's cool, but if you can't enjoy life, then being an emperor isn't worth it. His brother says he doesn't want to lead this country, but rather command troops in battles, so why was he born with that name? However, as the eldest son of the Tu Yi family and the prince of the Great Chan Kingdom, he had no choice. Tu Yi becomes thoughtful. Then he says it would be simple. In the future, he would take the position of emperor to help him. He would even remove the Tu surname from his brother so he wouldn't have to worry and could live as he wished. Tu Su is riding his horse saying that Tu Yi never changed and was always an idiot. He orders everyone to march towards the city of Tianjin. Meanwhile, in the capital, Shu tells Tian Yuan to leave because His Majesty doesn't want to see anyone. Tian Yuan says that enemy troops are less than 800 miles away and he needs to speak with His Majesty. Shu replies that Tu Yi is already aware of that, but he trusts that Tian Yuan will handle this matter well. After all the Longxing guards are under his command, so naturally, this is now his responsibility. As Grand Chancellor, he should share His Majesty's burdens and help solve the problems. Shan Yuan wonders if Tu Yi is trying to shift all the blame onto him. However, he shouts saying they are underestimating Tu Su's forces. He was known as the Great General. Shu says not to worry because Tu Yi is well aware of all that. Shan Yuan was to control the rear troops without taking risks. The plan was for the soldiers to show some bravery in front of the enemy and then retreat. Even if they lost, it would be an honor. Shan Yuan is confused, trying to understand if winning or losing truly doesn't matter. What were His Majesty's true intentions with this move? Shu simply leaves, saying His Majesty is eager for good news. He then closes the door and starts stretching, saying that pretending in front of that old man is exhausting. With crossed arms, Tu Yi asks if everything went well, and Shu says yes. According to his instructions, she ensured that Shan Yuan would lead the army and make them retreat. Tu Yi then approaches for a massage and is curious about what will happen, since if the northern troops reach Kainjing, the consequences would be unimaginable. How could he at such a crucial moment put Shan Yuan in charge of everything and still say that winning or losing didn't matter? He says that when it comes to victory or defeat, of course he cares, thinking it would be great if they lost, obviously. He's doing all this because their troops are the second best in the Great Chen Empire, so there was a risk they might actually manage to defend. That's why, if they had to fight, he ordered Shan Yuan to lead them into a much more open area. That way, they would have no advantages and would surely be defeated. With all the pieces in play, a Jinna Rebellion event would be easily completed, and Tu Su would be furious. He's laughing like a madman while Shu begins to recognize that smile. She is certain that Shan Yuan will suffer greatly this time. Shan Yuan, meanwhile, is walking alone in the courtyard, thinking about the leader assigning him these responsibilities and saying the result didn't matter. Suddenly, someone comes running, calling his name. It was Zhao Zhu, furious, saying it was no coincidence that he pretended to be sick on the day of the court. He grabs him by the collar and says he joined Tu Yi to plot against him. Shan Yuan pulls Zhao Zhu's arm away and tells him to stop talking nonsense because he never planned anything with Tu Yi. The chubby guy demands an explanation for why Shan Yuan was promoted to Grand Chancellor right after he lost his position. Shan Yuan replies that the prince did that to make them fight each other. Besides, Tu Su was marching toward Kainjing, so it wasn't the time to argue over trivial matters. However, Zhao Zhu says this isn't trivial to him, especially since he knows about the women Shan Yuan placed beside Tu Yi. One was working as the national advisor and the other was managing his treasures. Was he really planning to join forces with Tu Yi? He then threatens him, saying he knows the identity of those two women he adopted many years ago, and he's sure Tian Yuan doesn't want Tu Yi to find out about it. Tian Yuan's expression changes. He calms down for a second and says he's starting to understand Lord Zhao. Perhaps his previous actions caused a misunderstanding and he would clear it up now. As he reaches for his shirt, the chubby guy asks what he's planning to do. He's startled to see Shan Yuan revealing a golden tiger seal. Shan Yuan says it's exactly what he's thinking. This is the talisman that allows him to command 30,000 troops in Kainjing. He offers it to Zhao to take command and asks him not to refuse. The chubby guy remembers when the emperor was still alive. Before dying, he gave the jade seal to one and the tiger seal to the other, to maintain balance among the ministers. The jade seal went to Zhao Zhuo, making him responsible for assisting the emperor in decision-making, and the tiger seal went to Tian Yuan to help the emperor control his troops. It was only because of this that both managed to maintain some influence even after Tu Yi's death. However, due to Tu Yi's methods, Zhao Zhu gradually lost all his support and is now desperate. Shan Yuan says that as the one holding the tiger talisman, he is the only person who poses a threat to the emperor. That's why Tu Yi openly promoted him to Grand Chancellor and wants him to resist the northern troops. Looking at the talisman, he knows this thing is a hot potato. It was better to use it to at least stabilize Zhao Zhuo before he did something foolish. However, Zhao Zhu's expression changes and he asks if Tian Yuan is playing dirty again. He already understands that if he accepts the talisman, he'll have to lead the troops to face Tu Su in the north. Considering how insane Tu Su was, it would be impossible for him to win. He slaps the talisman away and says that if Tian Yuan wants to send someone to die, it should be himself. Suddenly, Tian Yuan pauses for a moment and seriously calls Zhao by name. He asks if he made this offer so kindly to make Zhao forget the situation he's in. Its imperial seal was broken. He no longer had any dignity before the officials, and even Shu had betrayed him. At this moment, he had no cards left to play. Confused, Zhao Zhu asks if he's being threatened. Shan Yuan pauses briefly, picks up the tiger seal from the ground, and says he's just stating facts. Holding the tiger talisman is risky, but it's the only thing Zhao can do now. This talk of playing dirty is nonsense because the strategy is quite clear. Since Zhao hadn't completely lost his position and would have the talisman, he could control the Longzhuang troops. Shan Yuan shoves it into his friend's mouth. He tells him that considering their past relationship, this is the last chance he'll give. He leaves, waving goodbye, telling him to take advantage of the opportunity. Zhao Zhu pulls the object from his mouth, saying he knows that taking those troops to war is a death sentence. However, Tian Yuan wasn't wrong, and this was the only card he had to play. and the problem was that he was up against powerful enemies, Tu Ye, Tu Su, and Tan Yuan. If that's the case, they better not complain about what he was going to do. The scene then shifts to a burning house. A woman cries while holding her child as soldiers pass by with supplies. In the following days, the villages near Qianjing were looted by Zhao Zuo, who was leading the troops. One man grabs a soldier's foot and says that without food, they won't survive the winter. Seeing this, Zhao Zuo says that these soldiers are idiots and can't handle something so simple. If he hadn't ordered the villages to be burned, imagine how long it would take to gather these supplies. A soldier then informs Zhao that the military actions have been carried out. His name is Tanshu, and he says it's strange that they, who need to fight the rebels, are looting nearby villages even before the battle begins. He pauses for a second and yells that with this plundering, people wouldn't survive the winter, and this would damage their master's reputation. The guards remain still until Zhao pulls the curtain aside and calls for the commander. He asks if he's questioning his decisions. The man responds that he would never do that. He's just afraid this will affect the soldiers' morale. Zhao Zhu asks if, with full morale, they would have a chance against Tu Su's troops. The man doesn't dare say yes, and Zhao Zhu says that's why he made plans to increase their chances of victory. They would adopt a scorched earth policy, leaving Tu Su's army with nothing to steal. Shanshu says this strategy makes no sense because they're robbing their own people. Zhao Zhu replies that because they are His Majesty's people, they must suffer and sacrifice for them. That was the honor of these people's lives. Already in his carriage, he thanks Tian Wan for the army and casually says he obviously wouldn't face Tu Su head-on. He would take as many resources as possible, and when the rebel forces arrived, he would flee and leave everyone to die there. The China dynasty was vast, and he was just curious about which place he would rest next. The people outside can only hear him laughing. One of the men asks the commander what they should do. The commander responds that as long as Zhao Zhu holds the tiger talisman, they can't disobey his orders. But he seems to hint at a plan for how they will handle all of this. Meanwhile, in the forest, Xiao was running across the treetops, noticing the burned villages from afar. She knew this was the work of that foolish emperor. Suddenly, a man stands up from the bushes and she turns, asking who's there. With his hands raised, he asks if she belongs to the Zhenbai army and says he has no hostility. He was only there to deliver orders from Commander Wan, who was specifically waiting for her. Xiao asks what the purpose is. The man explains that the Longxing guards were not enemies of Prince Chu Su, and the supplies they left behind proved that. At that moment, Xiao realizes why everything had been so easy. The soldier looks at the village and says that unfortunately, the other resources they were supposed to leave behind were taken from that place. She asks if it was the work of that foolish emperor, and he says no. It was Zhao Zu's doing, who held the tiger talisman, leaving the commander powerless against him. He'd been looting the entire area around Qianjing, using this strategy of stripping everyone of resources to starve Tu Su's army. That's why his commander told him to go there and cooperate with the Zhenbai troops. She pauses for a moment and says she understands. He asks what she's going to do, and then she whistles. An eagle approaches, and she explains that she can't verify what he said. However, she will pass the information to the prince, and he will make his own judgment. She sends the eagle off, and he asks if she's not going to deliver the message personally. Xiao replies that she has more important things to do. She vanishes, saying they would meet again soon. A flag rises in front of the city walls. Someone is observing everything, and obviously it's Tu Yi. With his non-existent binoculars, he says that finally everything is under his control. Looking at the troops, he notices that Zhao Zhu took all the trained soldiers, leaving behind only those who can't fight. And seeing how prepared his brother's army is, he's eager to watch it all be destroyed. However, he starts noticing that something feels off. He had heard that his brother had an army of 100,000 soldiers, but in front of him there weren't nearly that many. Could it be that his brother thought he was so useless that he decided to attack without using his entire force? Then something catches his attention. It's his brother approaching on horseback. He wonders why the attack hasn't started yet, and why he's coming alone. Seeing a soldier readying an arrow, Tu Yi questions if that bastard isn't afraid. He rushes over and tells the soldier to stop preparing that arrow. From atop a wall, he shouts for him to lower that damn bow. Because if Tu Su were killed, who else would conquer the Qian dynasty? But of course, from below, Tu Su hears everything and laughs. He then calls out to Tu Yi and asks if he finally became the foolish emperor he always wanted to be. The type of person who only seeks worldly pleasures and refuses to follow rules. Our guy, acting all smug, says that everyone really is talking about him. Until his brother says he went too far playing the role of a foolish emperor, hiding all of his kindness behind this disguise. Suddenly, the flags stop waving. Tu Yi pauses for a second, unable to understand what just happened. His brother mentioned kindness, but he has no idea what he's talking about. He wonders if Tu Su is referring to himself. Wait, this wasn't making sense. Until suddenly, he stops and says now he understands. His brother was using a tactic of approaching alone, pretending to have no bad intentions. And those words were meant to disarm him. He doesn't want to kill the soldiers of this city, which is why he's hoping Tu Yi will surrender without a fight. The problem is that surrendering won't complete the challenge, which requires the city to be conquered. So this must end with a battle. He then shouts that his brother likes to call himself a god of war. Yet right before the battle, He wants to have formal conversations on the front lines. His brother calls him my emperor and shakes his head saying no, but he comments that Tuyi's tongue is as sharp as ever. Still, if the subject is ceremony, it's time for the main event, and he orders the flags to be raised. Tuyi feels that something is wrong. The army's orders are then given, and Tusu asks why they are there. The troops shout that they will punish Zhao Zhu and cleans the court. Everyone starts chanting while Tusu keeps his eyes on Tuyi to see his reaction. He even winks at him, saying he never forgot his promise. Obviously, this causes Tuyi's mission to fail, and Tusu becomes the rightful heir to the throne. With the emperor and the troops stabilized, Tuyi gains 5,000 points, totaling 5,900. The poor guy is practically a skeleton, unable to believe any of this. While the troops chant to eliminate Zhao Zuo, the chubby man is fleeing, apologizing to this puppet emperor. But he wouldn't help Tusu destroy this entire place. He waves goodbye to both, saying he's taking over now and leaving them to finish the job. Tuyi collapses behind the wall. Now that Tusu called him emperor, his position was officially recognized. Tusu opens his arms and says he came to the capital to congratulate him for ascending to the throne. After all, they had agreed on all of this 10 years ago. Tuyi would stay on the throne, living as the emperor, while his brother fought on the front lines. Because for Tusu, the life of an emperor was worse than death. The throne and the imperial title were shackles that wouldn't let him live as he pleased. But his brother managed to fulfill that old promise, and now he's finally free from all of it. Tuyi stammers, trying to speak, then says he didn't do any of this and it wasn't his fault. So he suggests they let it go and asks if they plan to kill Zhao Zuo. His brother laughs and asks who Tuyi thinks he is. That was more than obvious. Zhao Zhu forged an imperial decree to try to kill him and even used the tiger talisman to ravage these lands. He had already deployed 80,000 of his troops to march north against Zhao Zuo. It wouldn't take long before Zhao Zhu's head was brought as a gift for Tuyi's coronation. Suddenly, Tusu's expression changes and he wonders where his brother is. Had he trained all those words just to appear powerful? That's when someone appears at the gate. Tuyi charges out on horseback, fleeing the area. He hadn't realized Zhao Zhu was causing all this chaos with the tiger talisman, and now it made sense why his brother hadn't attacked. It really was his responsibility to kill that bastard. The scene shifts to another part of the city where some soldiers are holding back. Zhao Zhu is whipping a commander, saying this is punishment for secretly meeting with Tusu's men, betraying them all and siding with the rebels. What he did went against the Emperor of Qian and obviously destroyed his trust. A crime like this deserved the execution of his entire family. After all that, the chubby man is visibly exhausted. Then someone calls out to the commander and Zhao Zhu asks if they can no longer bear the sight of this. This wasn't a place anyone could enter freely. He turns and asks the commander if he plans to order his soldiers to invade and kill him to take over the field. The commander pauses for a moment and tells the soldier not to get involved and to leave. The man tries to say something, but Zhao Zhu yells again, saying that as the Longxing army, they must obey the tiger talisman. The talisman represents the emperor, so how could they rebel against the kingdom? Zhao Zhu steps closer and says that defying him is defying the emperor, so it would be best to leave. The commander then tells the man to leave immediately, but Zhao Zhu stops him, saying he won't let someone who invaded the tent leave so easily. He invaded the camp, disrespected authority, and was planning treason. According to the law, the punishment for such actions is death. He approaches the man and says he'll think of a fitting punishment for him, perhaps cutting him piece by piece or roasting him like a pig, or the simplest way, cutting his throat. But suddenly, someone grabs Zhao Zhu's arm. Everyone looks back, and it's Tuyi, standing behind him, ready to kill this wretched man. Tuyi shouts for Zhao Zhu to stop testing his luck, or he'll die right here. The chubby man turns, confused, and asks why he would die. Tuyi grabs his head and tells him to look over there. He points out into the distance and asks if Zhao Zhu can see what's coming. It's 80,000 northern soldiers marching to kill him, with a battle cry calling to purge the court and execute Zhao Zhu. The chubby man starts wondering if he's fallen into a trap. While Tuyi cuts the ropes, he comments on how, at such a critical moment, Zhao Zhu lost all loyalty from the Longxing camp. Zhao Zhu's ability to seek death was truly unmatched. If Tuyi hadn't arrived in time, there would have been no saving him. As Tuyi cuts the rope, Zhao Zhu mutters to himself that this is impossible. Suddenly, he starts laughing. He says he understands now and nearly fell for such a stupid trick. Obviously, Tuyi wouldn't be kind enough to save him. He must have fled the destruction of Qianjing, which is why he's here. Tuyi looks confused, but Zhao Zhu insists, saying that the whole purge the court story almost convinced him. But he knows that if such an order existed from Tusu, Tuyi would have been the first to die. He charges with his sword, scaring the two men, but someone comes from the side and strikes him. The commander calls out Yuan Hu's name, and Zhao Zhu turns, saying that this guy must also be seeking death. With a slash from below, Zhao Zhu cuts Yuan Hu, and the poor man falls lifeless to the ground. Tuyi just watches as Zhao Zhu points his sword at him, demanding obedience. Zhao Zhu says that when they leave the camp, he'll present Tuyi's head to the emperor as a great achievement. But Tuyi calmly calls out Zhao Zhu's name, prompting Zhao to ask what he wants. Zhao Zuo warns Tu Yi to stop calling himself the emperor because now it's he, the great Zhao Zuo, who decides if Tu Yi continues to live. Anyone who opposed his plans in court would die, including the concubines. However, since Tu Yi would soon be dead, he didn't need to worry too much. He claims that the women he placed near Tu Yi were just tools sent to spy on him, especially Shu, whom he refers to as a second-hand woman he had sent to numerous men. When a tool like that turns against its master, it loses its value and has only one fate. She would be destroyed and erased from existence. But Tu Yi, radiating his aura, keeps repeating Zhao Zuo's name. He repeats it over and over, slowly turning toward the chubby man. Then he punches him in the face, sending him tumbling to the ground. Zhao Zuo gets up, disoriented as Tu Yi approaches. Tu Yi calls him a filthy pig and says everything Zhao Zuo does is always cruel. He declares that he's tired of it all and punches him in the chest, saying he's fed up with this transmigration. He punches Zhao Zuo in the face, stating he doesn't care about this mission anymore since it's already failed. And with a kick to the groin, he curses the system and tells it to go to hell. Zhao Zuo writhes on the ground in pain. Tu Yi then demands that Zhao Zuo repeat what he said about tools that no longer align with their master. They must be destroyed. He admits he was so afraid of leaving heirs in this world that he avoided certain activities. This would help maintain the empire, which was not what he wanted, so he had been exercising every day. He also had 3 days without sleep while designing those clothes. He even had to learn the curse language of this world. And yet, despite all that, they still had the courage to call him useless. The chubby man stumbled out of the tent, bouncing his way outside. He collapsed on the ground with his arms spread, completely confused by what Tu Yi had been saying. That's when he noticed soldiers staring at him. He turned and asked why they were just standing there, ordering them to protect him. But the soldiers just pretended they didn't see anything. Zhao Zuo began trembling when he saw Tu Yi stepping out of the tent, with soldiers clearing a path for him. At that moment, Zhao Zuo noticed something in Tu Yi's eyes. From the very beginning, he had been wrong. He slammed his head into the ground, admitting he had learned his lesson. Tu Yi asks what exactly he was wrong about. Zhao Zuo admits he shouldn't have led the troops as if they were his personal property. Tu Yi places his hand on him and Zhao Zuo confesses he also shouldn't have fled the battlefield. Our boy grabs him by the hair while Zhao Zuo keeps repeating that he learned his lesson and was wrong. Tu Yi then says that wealth, power, armies, or the throne, none of that mattered to him. The only thing he wanted was to trust people and for them to fulfill their roles, but everyone betrayed him. Zhao Zuo, confused, asks what trust he's talking about and who betrayed him. Tu Yi simply tells him to say it out loud. Totally confused, Zhao Zuo hesitantly says, "I betrayed him." Tu Yi punches him in the face and orders him to shout it. He then screams for everyone to hear that he betrayed the emperor. Along with that, he betrayed the entire Qian dynasty. He betrayed the people of Qian by stealing from them and causing them to suffer. He truly was a sinner of this dynasty. After standing still for a moment, he slams his face into the ground, begging for forgiveness. Tu Yi just sighs. Looking up, he says he's tired while Zhao Zuo keeps smashing his face into the ground, admitting he's guilty. Suddenly, Zhao Zuo's expression changes as he grabs a knife, saying he would never act that way. When Tu Yi turns around, Zhao Zuo was already lunging at him. Blood splatters, but it's unclear if he hit Tu Yi. Zhao Zuo looks twisted, and it's hard to tell from his expression. But Xiao, who had been silently watching, strikes him on the back of the neck. Tu Yi glances at her and remarks that she finally made a move. Confused, Xiao wonders if he knew she had been there among the army the entire time. He looks at her, and the system informs him that the leader of the Kun Guard is struggling, unsure whether to remain loyal to Tu Su or Tu Yi. Holding Zhao Zuo, Xiao was trying to figure out if Tu Yi knew everything from the start. Zhao Zuo collapses and Xiao says he's not dead, only unconscious, but she knows exactly what Tu Yi plans to do with him. Our boy is deep in thought. From the start, he believed Zhao Zuo would help him bring down the empire, but he was completely wrong. He would have to take control and handle things himself. So he tells Xiao that Zhao Zuo's life is now in the hands of the Longsheng army. He no longer had any use for him. With this, he eliminates a traitor of the Zhao Zuo empire, earning another 5,000 national points. Xiao stands there, bewildered at how he managed to handle everything alone. By himself, he stopped Zhao Zuo, regained military power, and prevented a civil war in the Kaiying dynasty. Watching him walk away with his 10,900 points, she wonders who he truly is. Meanwhile, the other army is approaching. One of the soldiers raises his arm, telling everyone to prepare because Zhao Zuo's troops are just ahead. Then one of them points and tells General Wang to take a look. He turns, curious, and becomes confused. There was a troop carrying someone impaled on a spear. It was Zhao Zuo with his tongue hanging out, apparently hanged and displayed on a banner. The scene shifts to someone shouting Shu's name, calling her a coward and filthy. She's running when a hand grabs her foot, making her fall flat on her face. She turns around and someone calls her sister, asking why she's ignoring them. It was a skeleton asking if she had forgotten them and why she hadn't avenged them. She should survive and kill Zhao Zuo. She tries to escape as countless skulls try to pull her back. Ahead of her stands a monstrous version of Zhao Zuo, calling her name. He says she betrayed him, and a tool that betrays its master must end up like the others. But suddenly, there's an explosion in front of her. When the smoke clears, she sees a sword aim at Zhao Zuo's head. Looking up, it's a towering, majestic Tu. She calls out, "Your Majesty," and then hears a voice calling her name. She wakes up in bed, and a girl tells her that His Majesty has returned safely. He was preparing to summon all the ministers to the Grand Hall. Moreover, Zhao Zuo had been executed. Shu cries with emotion, saying it's finally over. The next day, after everything that happened, our boy returned to Kanjing to receive congratulations. However, he's thinking to himself that the plan is to destroy this damned country. But what has he actually managed to destroy so far? The entire court was in perfect order. The harem was far too devoted, and there wasn't even a femme fatale to suddenly assassinate him. Tu Su, with his troops, was determined to keep him on the throne. And even Tianyuan, who was supposed to be his trump card, had become quite calm after everything that happened with Zhao Zuo. With all these prominent figures in place, the nation's power had risen beyond 15,000. So how was he supposed to destroy this country? Right beside him, Tianyuan is wondering why the boy doesn't seem happy after getting rid of Zhao Zuo. He glances back and sees Tu Su staring, making a throat-slitting gesture. Tianyuan realizes that Tu Yi isn't happy because he's still alive. The delicate balance between the three factions was gone. Tu Su was already siding with Tu Yi, leaving only Tianyuan's side undecided, making him the next target to be eliminated. Maybe it was time for him to take a stand in all this. Tu Yi was confused when Tianyuan said he wanted to discuss something. He had heard that the emperor personally went to the army and executed Zhao Zuo himself. Such an action truly brought satisfaction to everyone there. However, it was obvious Zhao Zuo could only control the troops because Tu Yi had let him hold onto the tiger talisman. He had failed to prevent that from happening, so ultimately, it was his fault. That's why Tianyuan was willing to accept any punishment and was even ready to resign from his position as Grand Chancellor to set an example. Tu Yi just tells him to shut up because he isn't in the mood to hear excuses right now. Meanwhile, he thinks to himself how cunning this guy is, blaming the dead at the first chance he gets. Tu Yi then says he's interested in an unknown journey across the Qian dynasty. And when he returns, they'll discuss him losing his position. Tianyuan is confused. The court had just been stabilized, so why was Tu Yi suddenly wanting to leave? He tries to ask His Majesty to reconsider, but Tu Yi immediately asks if he's really going to tell him what to do. Tianyuan instantly changes his expression, saying he wouldn't dare. Tu Yi knows he can't rely on anyone within this dynasty to destroy it, which is why he needs external forces. He knows of an extremely strong tribe in Kanglang to the north, one so fierce that even the southern regions struggle to face them. To the south, across the sea, there's the nation of Jing. Their leader named Shu Lai has been attacked countless times by Tu Yi's father, but was never defeated. Additionally, there's the Red Sleeve Army, with countless followers scattered everywhere. Since the first two options are too far away, perhaps the best choice is to find the Red Sleeve Army and make them attack this nation. The Emperor of Qian would become a spy for the rebels who would destroy everything. It was exactly the kind of story he liked. Meanwhile, Tianyuan notices the prince smirking again. The scene shifts to a torch being raised in front of the Red Sleeve Army's barracks. Inside, several men wearing strange masks are dancing, some mentioning bad news and others good news. A girl sits surrounded by candles and says that 3 months ago, the new emperor ascended the throne and created turmoil in the court. However, unfortunately, the Qian dynasty's luck hadn't run out yet. That girl was Wu Dongxuan. Apparently, she must be the leader of the Red Sleeve Army. And to be honest, their sleeves were black, but let's ignore that. It's probably a translation error. She wants to know what the bad news is in all this. The Red Sleeve Army is also known as the Hongxiu Army. At that moment, numerous hooded figures turn around, watching someone's arrival. It was our dear Tu Yi calmly walking through the city, accompanied by Xiao. She warns that the northern region is chaotic and even Tu Su struggles to handle it. Tu Yi replies that she's already told him 8,000 times along the way to be cautious. The only thing Tu Yi finds odd is that he knows Longsing City is where the Tu family first built its power. 500 years ago, Tu family ancestors killed a dragon and presented its head in this region. Since then, the Tu family had gained more and more influence until they established the Qian dynasty. This Longsing region had always been part of everything. Yet recently, different forces began stabilizing in this place. He knows his father and brother love war, so why did they allow the Red Sleeve Army to stabilize there? Even Tusu insisted that he take Xiao with him, refusing to let him go alone. The problem was that it wasn't just Xiao. There were a bunch of men following him, and he wondered why they couldn't disguise themselves properly. One of the men turns and asks if His Majesty is staring at them too much. Maybe he's already realized he's being followed. Another one gives a thumbs up and says he used a special magic, so they won't be detected. Xiao is also there, telling Tianyuan that he hasn't lost his position as minister yet, so he should be in the capital taking care of things. Tianyuan replies that His Majesty is cunning, and leaving him in that ministerial position puts him in a difficult spot. That's because Tu Su is still in the capital, which is a huge risk for him. That's why the city of Kanjing is dangerous, and the best solution is to stay there and secretly follow His Majesty. Xiao says she doesn't understand, and he responds that it's fine because she'll understand sooner or later. As long as they maintain the perfect disguise, it shouldn't be a problem. But judging by Tu Yi's expression, it's obvious their cover isn't perfect. 2D says they can do whatever they want. If they're so determined to follow him, it's all the same to him. Suddenly, Cho pushes him behind her. 2D looks ahead and sees a group of small-time bandits blocking their path. It seems they belong to the Red Sleeve Army. A bald man holding a saber says he's never seen them in the city and asks if they're from Su's side. Maybe it were spies from the Imperial Court. Cho prepares for combat, but 2D tells her to hold back and wait. He thinks he's lucky to have found these guys so easily and wonders where their leader is. Soon after, they're already climbing the stairs to the group's base. The vibrant Dongxuan sits there amidst candles, but she's casually eating a bunch of scorpions. What's going on here? Dongxuan, the leader, is highly skilled in magic and has the ability to manipulate people's hearts. She's been gathering refugees from everywhere as her followers with the goal of destroying the Qian dynasty. There are even some strange creatures coming out of her mouth, good heavens. Licking her lips, she says he's bold to come to Longsing like this. Tui asks if it's not the prince of the Black Sleeve Army who welcomes refugees, so no courage was necessary for this. However, she responds that with how he looks, she doubts they are refugees. No matter how he's dressed to conceal his identity, his behavior is revealing. Besides, the woman beside him has the face of someone who moves in the shadows and spills blood. 2D congratulates her, saying it's expected from the great leader of the army to notice instantly. He then claims he's a secret envoy from the nation of Jing, sent by His Majesty to cause chaos in the Kaya nation. Recall that Jing is the nation across the sea to the south. He says he's specifically there to seek cooperation with the Black Sleeve Army. Suddenly, something hits the ground, startling him. Dongxuan turns and says cooperation sounds wonderful. She approaches him, saying that since he revealed his identity, she no longer needs to hide. She touches a peculiar spot and says he must also be interested in the dragon root hidden within the Qian Empire. He's confused after all, she just touched him in an odd place and mentioned the dragon root. Is she talking about him and was he truly exposed? She explains that everyone knows the dragon root is about to resurface in this world, which is why the nation of Jing is also present. He still doesn't quite understand. Dongxuan explains that every 500 years, the Qian nation has a dragon emperor. Whoever manages to cut off his head and harvest the root will gain the emperor's power and have the aura to dominate the entire world. The last time the dragon emperor appeared, a man from the Tu family decapitated him and used that power to establish the great dynasty. Back then, Tu Tianxia, alongside his sworn brother Chu, killed the dragon. But Chu gained nothing but scars. The entire situation turned into a chaotic mess, and that's when each of them founded their own nation. With the dragon's power, Tu Tianxia built the Grand Kaya nation in the north. Meanwhile, Chu used what remained in the south to create the Jing dynasty. Now 500 years have passed and a new dragon emperor has been born. Whoever cuts off his head will change the world. The system notifies Tu Yi that he has found the path to the dragon emperor's aura story, and now he needs to learn more from this girl to continue his journey. He's excited. Visiting the Red Sleeve Army was definitely the right decision. He then asks if Dongxuan also seeks the dragon emperor's aura to take control of the world. However, Dongxuan says she has a rebellious spirit and has no interest in becoming an empress. But she knows the Jing nation has been interested in this for over 500 years. She gets close and says these lands are under her control, so with her help, victory would come much easier. However, gripping his chin, she wants to know what she gains by helping the Jing nation. Tu Yi isn't foolish. He studied her history before coming here. Dongxuan was once from the Feng nation, whose village was massacred during the war against Qian. Amidst all that chaos, she encountered an immortal and learned medicine and magic from him, which she used to help others who had suffered like her. Little by little, she gained a reputation among the refugees and founded the Red Sleeve Army, aiming to destroy the Chan nation. In books, Tu Yi had read about many people like her, lonely souls driven by war. He knows that this woman is acting eccentric and mystical, but it's all just a disguise to survive in these chaotic times. Tu Yi then says he came to discuss cooperation and brings two promises. The first was the destruction of the Qian kingdom, which was a goal they both shared. Dongxuan responds that she knows the nation of Jing wants to unify the world. So the fall of Qian wasn't exactly a promise. It was something that was bound to happen. Tu Yi says that's why he has a second promise. His leader wanted to be recognized as a wise figure for all ages, and for that he aimed to reform the laws to establish heaven on earth. Basically, to bring peace to the world. Dongxuan blushes slightly and straightens up upon hearing this. Tu Yi clears his throat and says he'll explain the basic principles of the government he wants to create. Of course, he plans to use a lot of modern concepts to impress these people from ancient times. While he's speaking with them, someone watches from afar. Shan Yuan can't understand why Tu Yi wanted to meet with Dongxuan at a time like this. And the worst part is, he can't hear what they're talking about. He asks Xiao to use some kind of magic so they can listen to the conversation. Xiao explains that the opponent is also highly skilled in magic, and at such a close distance, it could be dangerous. She begins folding an origami figure, saying that maybe there's a way to handle this. Then she activates a shadow capturing spell. The little creature flies to a tree right behind Tu Yi and lands. Tu Yi is talking to Dongxuan about developing and improving people's lives through land reforms, agriculture, and something along those lines. promoting trade, the circulation of materials, and establishing education and technology. Tianyuan asks why the words sound so broken, and Chao says they're too far away. Even so, Tianyuan can sense that it's something about governance and that there's a certain wisdom behind it, but it still sounds too vague and impossible to achieve in this era. Then the origami transmits the phrase, "All men are born equal." Xia smiles, saying that equality for everyone is a romantic idea. However, Tianyuan becomes desperate upon hearing that. He says that in the past, a man named Xing Liu tried to challenge the nobility and was torn apart by 5 horses. If everyone under heaven were treated equally, it would bring the Qianyuan dynasty to ruin. The nobles and the emperor would bring disaster upon themselves with nowhere to escape. He's about to say that this would truly be the end, but then he sees 2E still speaking. Everyone around him is smiling as they listen to him, and this makes Tianyuan pause in thought. He admits it's truly shameful. While he and Zhao Zhu were plotting to overthrow his majesty, 2E had the ambition to improve the world for everyone. Meanwhile, 2E raises his arms in exhaustion. He's tired after talking so much and people even bring him water. Dongshuan compliments him, saying his descriptions are very tempting, and if it truly worked, it would be like heaven on earth. He smiles, saying he knew she'd understand. But then her expression changes, and she asks if he really thinks she's an idiot who would believe such lies. The Qia nation would never implement such policies or make those promises. 2E is startled, and she demands to know who he really is. She already knew he wasn't from the Jing nation. That's because when Lord Chu founded the Jing nation in the south, he needed help to gain more power. The Jing nation has always been tied to the most powerful clans and nobles in that region, so promising something like this made no sense. 2D realizes he might have promised policies that were too advanced and didn't know that Jing had such a history. He desperately tries to think of a way to avoid getting beaten up. Then Shou steps in front of him and tells everyone to stay back. Dongshuan asks what would happen if she refused. They had stepped onto Red Sleeve Army territory, and if they didn't explain themselves, it would all die. It was better to reveal who they really were. Tu Yi then confesses. He says he didn't expect her to see through him, but he is indeed from the Chan nation. Dongshuan responds that she already knew. The people of Jiang were the ones she hated the most. Tu Yi quickly asks her to wait. Even though he was from Qian, just like her, he wanted this nation to fall. Shan Yuan is shocked. Xia says that the emperor seems to be in danger and asks if they should go save him. Chen Yuan responds that for now, it's better to trust his majesty. Surely he must have some kind of plan. Though internally, he's extremely curious to see how his majesty plans to convince Dongzhuan in a situation like this. Then Tu Yi boldly declares that he is the Grand Chancellor and Prime Minister of the Jiang Nation, named Lai Qianyuan. The real Lai Qianyuan is stunned, completely unable to understand what's happening. Dongshuan, confused, asks if he's really Qianyuan. Tu Yi confidently confirms, saying he always dreamed of taking Tu Yi's throne and establishing a nation of equality. That's why he served that damned old man Qianjun like a dog, but finally the old man is dead. Dongshuan responds that she heard the emperor had indeed died recently, and that 2 ministers, Tianyuan and Zhao Zuo, were supporting a useless prince named Tu Yi. But suddenly, Tu Su appeared and supported Tu Yi's rise to power. Tu Yi agrees, saying that's exactly what happened, and he has no idea why Tu Su acted that way. Dongshuan says she also heard that Zhao Zhu was executed, while Tianyuan kept his position. However, it seems he lost all influence and was even imprisoned by Tu Yi. Tu Yi, staying in character, says that damned Tu Yi really tried to kill him, but he barely escaped from Qianjing. Dongshuan thinks for a moment and says she heard Qianyuan was extremely intelligent and talented. It makes sense, considering the government plans he presented. But she also heard Qianyuan was much older. Tu Yi quickly claims he has techniques that keep his skin young, but that's not what matters. What matters is that as long as that fool Tu Yi sits on the throne, his ideas for governance will never come to life. Dongshuan asks if he's trying to imitate Xing Liu from history, the minister who betrayed the emperor. But she knows that story ends with him obtaining the dragon root and becoming emperor himself. Tu Yi raises his hands and denies it. Dongshuan still seems unconvinced and says that for now, they'll postpone this talk of cooperation. First, she has to deal with something else, the rats hiding in this place. Xia immediately realizes they've been discovered, but the moment she tries to move, Dongshuan is already beside her, asking if they were enjoying eavesdropping on others' conversations. Xia reaches into her pocket, trying to grab an escaped talisman, but Dongshuan notices, swiftly spinning on the ground, impressed by Xia's skill with talismans. However, she says it's a shame that Xia isn't strong enough to face her. Lightning flashes as Dongshuan unleashes the 8-direction assault. Xia's hat is burned to the ground and she's left completely fried. Just as Tianyuan tries to act, Dongshuan's hand is already on his shoulder, remarking that he had a very interesting subordinate by his side. With such a strong protector, he must also be an extraordinary figure. She grins, saying she's lucky to have found 2 remarkable people today. Seeing all this, Tu Yi realizes his plan has completely fallen apart. And why is that boy drooling so much? Dongshuan then asks directly, "Who exactly are you?" Tu Yi starts thinking. He just pretended to be Tianyuan. Would Tianyuan dare pretend to be Tu Yi in return? But no, that wouldn't make sense if their ages are too far apart. He knows he can't say something that's stupid. Meanwhile, Tianyuan starts to speak, trembling. A flashback shows an old man asking Tianyuan why he wanted to study. Tianyuan explains that his father was a scholar, and from a young age he read countless books. At that time, he simply surrounded himself with knowledge but never questioned why. He tells his father that he just wanted to read, never considering any greater purpose. His father responds that he must establish a heart for heaven and earth, create a life for the people, and continue the teachings of the ancient sages. That was the path the sages taught for scholars to follow. However, his father wasn't as noble as the sages. All that talk about establishing a heart for heaven and earth or creating a life for the people was just a means to an end. What his father truly wanted was to leave his name in history. This left Tianyuan deep in thought. The old man said that human life is so short that in less than 100 years, everyone is forgotten and becomes nothing but dust. Only by leaving his name recorded in history can a person be remembered by future generations, just like the scholars of the past. Through the teachings left behind, one could become immortal. Although Tianyuan didn't like his father's words, they gave him a sense of direction in life. But good times didn't last. Horses approached, and the entire village was set on fire. War had obviously reached their land. It was only then that he discovered the pride of a scholar meant nothing in the face of life and death. Everything he had been dedicating himself to was nothing more than a joke. He looked to the side and saw a man in a tree asking for help, saying he hadn't eaten for 3 days. The old man kept begging until Tianyuan approached and offered him something. The man immediately snatched it from his hand, and Tianyuan told him to eat slowly. No one would take it from him. Or so he thought, because when he looked around, countless starving people surrounded him. One of them asked if he didn't have more food, and another said that if he had some to offer, then he must have enough for everyone. Suddenly, they started running toward him, yelling for him to hand over everything because they were starving. But then someone stepped in front of him. It was his father, and Tianyuan wondered why this was happening. His father looked back and smiled, but Tianyuan stepped on a rock and tumbled down the mountain. As he got up, he heard the starving people saying that man didn't have enough food, but he could be eaten instead. From down below, he only heard his father's screams, shouting for them to stop. At that moment, he understood his father's words that day. Reading and studying weren't meant for people like them or for all beings. Study was meant for leaving your mark on the world, not to be a teacher of others, but a beast that holds the lives of millions. With that, he rose to the position of prime minister at a young age. Looking at the emperor in his coffin, he said that the old emperor had died too. In the end, he was a very useful pawn. He turned to the physicians and asked what use they were if they couldn't even save his majesty. Tianyuan said that shedding blood at the emperor's funeral was inappropriate. They should all be buried with him. While the men screamed, he stood there, unmoving, until Zhao Zhu approached and said that the emperor's last wish was for Tusu to ascend the throne. So what would they do? Tianyuan replied that the emperor's name was now just a historical record. The opportunity had landed in their hands. In the Kaiyang Empire, he would stand above all and become a leader of this world. Back in the present, Dongshuan asks what he's thinking about so much and demands he answer. Who exactly is he? At that moment, Tuyi wondered if Tianyuan might pretend to be Tuyi, but their ages didn't match at all. Tuyi began to speak and suddenly removed his hat. He introduced himself as the Emperor of Kaiyang, Tu Kanjin. Obviously, that was supposed to be the dead father of our boy, who is now in shock. He says he didn't actually die, while Tuyi is standing there, trying to figure out what's going on. Dongshuan stands in silence, seething with rage. She grabs him by the neck, demanding to know if he's mocking her. Tuyi, still maintaining his act, as he knows Dongshuan hates the Kaiyang dynasty to her very core. If he weren't desperate, he would never risk his life by coming here. He claims to despise that rebellious boy Tuyi, blaming him for everything that happened. That ungrateful son was extremely ambitious and cunning, always pretending to be a fool when he wasn't. Their father always believed he was the most incompetent of all his sons. In the background, Xiao is on the verge of exploding. How dare this bastard steal the emperor's title at a moment like this? Tuyi, posing as the former emperor, says he never imagined his son would ally with numerous ministers and plot to steal the throne, a scheme that lasted for years, even recruiting Zhao Zhu into it. Dongshuan begins to wonder why so many secrets of the court are being revealed to her today. Tuyi continues, claiming that the only person who remained loyal to him was Tianyuan, which in this case is Tuyi pretending to be Tianyuan. When Tuyi decided to seize all power, he had no choice but to fake his own death and escape. He kept Tianyuan in the court to create conflict between Tuyi and Zhao Zhuo, but everything went wrong. That's because his other ungrateful son, Tu Su, helped Tuyi kill Zhao Zhuo and establish the court. Now Xiao is even angrier. This man wasn't just tarnishing Tuyi's name, but also smearing Tu Su's. She swears that soon this man will meet the same end as Zhao Zhuo. Dongshuan coldly asks if he ran here like a beaten dog. In her grip, he pleads, calling Tuyi still pretending to be Tianyuan, a cruel minister for so long. He says he even insulted the emperor of his own will and endured great hardships. Xiao was ready to strike him down when suddenly Tuyi clasps his hands. He says that insulting his majesty was a necessary evil, and he deserves to die 1,000 times over. Xiao's rage eases. She sees that the boy is willing to cooperate with Tianyuan. Dongshuan throws him to the ground. She says she doesn't care because her hatred for the Kayan dynasty will never end. They came into her territory unarmed, so of course they wouldn't leave unscathed. Tu-yi slowly gets up, saying he's nothing more than a man who lost his throne. And while she could kill him, he knows that's not her best option, because the Kayan dynasty would still exist, and killing a king who's no longer king wouldn't give her the satisfaction she seeks. Dongsuan pauses for a moment and agrees. Killing just one wouldn't be enough. She wanted to see the family destroy itself, the entire nation crumble, the country destroyed, and the bloodline wiped out. Shan Yuan looks terrified, but Tu-yi is celebrating internally, thinking this part about the nation being destroyed is the best outcome. For Tu-yi, pretending to be his father was the perfect plan. This way, he wouldn't die because Dongsuan would want to use him to stir conflict. Calling himself the Destroyer, he thinks that, as expected, he can truly rely on someone as smart as himself. Dongsuan then asks if, besides wanting the Dragon Emperor's power, he also seeks the support of her troops. Tu-yi admits that he does. Since the Qian Kingdom's army is the second strongest, together they could destroy the dynasty. But Dongsuan cuts him off, telling him to stop dreaming. Even though she would love to see the two family fall apart, using her army to help the enemy is going too far. And that's something she will never do. Tu-yi laughs and says that if Dongsuan won't help him, why not help Chan Yuan instead? Immediately, Tu-yi gets a dumbfounded look on his face. He says that after everything that happened with his sons, he's tired of the throne. Dongsuan seems skeptical, but he insists that not only does he want to get rid of his two ungrateful sons, but he also needs to put someone on the throne who thinks about the people. Chan Yuan, he claims, is the right person for that. The soldiers around them, exhausted by this entire story, just sit down, waiting to see what will happen next. Dongsuan also sighs, fed up with all the talking, and tells them to throw him to the dogs. Tu-yi, pretending to be Tian Yuan, quickly says he can prove his identity. He reveals the Imperial Seal, an item meant to be a gift for the future successor and the new empress. Dongsuan is momentarily confused, wondering when she became the empress. But she starts to realize that everything he said might actually be true. Tu-yi stands there, completely devastated, while Tian Yuan, still Tu-yi in disguise, says this is a wedding gift. A hand suddenly grabs Tu-yi's shoulder. Dongsuan smirks and says that, considering everything he told her, he didn't seem like such a bad person. She admired his ideas for governing the country, so if he was worthy of being her man. And without further delay, she says it's time for them to consummate this marriage. Chan Yuan tries to say something, but she elbows him hard in the back of the neck. Before he can protest, she picks him up bridal style, carrying him off while telling Xiao not to worry, she wouldn't treat her master badly. Or maybe Xiao would want to join them in the wedding chamber. Xiao turns bright red and shouts for that pervert to shut up. Meanwhile, Tian Yuan is carried away, thinking that now everything depends on his majesty. He must become the true dragon. Tu-yi can afford to disappoint because now Tian Yuan's dream of being remembered in history rests in his hands. Later that night, Xiao is standing nearby when someone tells her to calm down and step away for a bit. Apparently, Xiao stayed behind to watch everything unfold, and unfold it did. The night was long and the roosters were already crowing loudly. The door creaks open and Dongsuan steps out, stretching. She makes a noise of disdain towards Xiao, who glares back in anger. Then they notice someone dragging himself out of the room. It's Tian Yuan, or rather Tu-yi, looking like a skeleton, even balding. He drags himself along, thinking he was nearly drained completely, but for the sake of destroying the nation, any sacrifice was worth it. He's just amazed at how bold Chan Yuan was to not only bring the Imperial Seal, but also sell him out like that. The future was promising. Dongsuan tells him to stop dwelling on everything that happened because it's time for them to head to the barracks and start planning. The poor guy, still dazed, wonders if they're really starting so soon. In the middle of the mountains, someone carries a torch. It's their group moving through a cave, and Dongsuan says they're almost there. Tu-yi feels a strange sensation about all of this. Suddenly, they see the exit, and Dongsuan announces that they're finally about to meet them. Everyone is stunned by the sight. Beyond the cave and between the mountains, Dongsuan reveals the beggars hiding at the base of the Red Sleeve Army. It's not just war-hardened soldiers forging weapons. There are an overwhelming number of people. Xiao quietly remarks that there are too many people here. It's impossible that they're all part of the army. Dongsuan was observing the Shanhe Society, the Yuan Tian group, members of the Alliance, and even the Shaolin sect. The beggars were there too. She explained that all these groups, both small and large rebel factions, had once been part of the Chan nation. However, the Kun Guard was also present. Tu-yi quickly realized he was now in the heart of the rebels who hated him the most. Everyone was staring at him, and he thought that each of them looked more rebellious than the last. Still, he smiled, thinking that Lai Xin had critical resources to destroy his nation. Chan Yuan was stunned. Even surrounded by enemies in their base, Tu-yi walked confidently, even smiling, truly fitting for someone of imperial blood. That's when Tian Yuan began to wonder if the boy already knew about the emergence of the dragon vein, and had allied with the rebels to wipe them all out at once. At that moment, someone seems to catch Tu-yi off guard. A guy wearing a bandana approaches and says Tu-yi looks familiar, asking which rebel group he's from. Our boy introduces himself as Tian Yuan, the exiled prime minister of the Chan nation, and says that beside him is the former emperor Tu Kanjun. The guy laughs and says that at least the new brother is pretty funny, but that joke wasn't all that funny. Then Dongsuan steps up and says that what he's saying isn't a joke, but the truth. Immediately, everyone greets her, calling her the great Daoist Daoju. She asks if he's disappointed. Did you really think that just because he's making a deal with her, everyone else there would support him for the same reason? She warns that there's a risk her army men won't support him, and since she's a businesswoman, she won't bet everything on one side. Tu Yi seems to think that this damn woman wants him to convince them for free. Suddenly, she spreads her arms and says she doesn't want to be an empress, but she's willing to support anyone who wants to sit on the dragon throne. This time, who is seeking the dragon's power would have a fair chance to compete. Shan Yuan knows this woman is using the dragon event as a trap to lure all the rebel forces and select the strongest among them. That would be enough to form a dangerous army to attack Qian. And Dongsuan is smiling, thinking that no matter how things turn out, in the end she won't lose. Shan Yuan wonders if our boy can handle a woman with such a cunning strategy. Tu Yi says not to worry because the more people competing, the more fun it gets. After all, in the end, the result will be the same. He's thinking that it doesn't matter who wins. What matters is finding someone who will destroy the cursed nation of Qian. Dongsuan grabs his chin and says it's no wonder she's starting to like him. He has a confidence she's never seen before. Even though she has countless men around, none of them could compete with our boy. An old man with a purple aura asks if the only ones competing with him are those from the Jing nation, making Tu Yi question if that nation is also joining this mess. Dongsuan says he's naive if he thinks the Jing nation wouldn't fight for the Dragon Veen. By her calculations, it should be arriving soon. Right at the entrance of the base, someone approaches. A red-haired man, a weirdly muscular guy, and a very dancey Cleopatra-like woman playing a flute. Dongsuan puts her hand on her waist and asks Chen Siming if he didn't go to receive the people from the Jing nation. He replies that he was with a group of Taoists and would never disobey her, so he brought them personally. Both of them look shocked. Then Chen Siming says he brought the person's head and asks if that's enough. They look at the three at the entrance, and then he tosses the head, which rolls and lands in front of them, completely dead. Dongsuan responds that she asked him to welcome the participants, so why did this happen? He laughs, steps closer, and says he can't be blamed for something like this. It's that guy's fault for being so weak, and oops, his head just exploded. Dongsuan replies that she knows he's dissatisfied with her position in the group and wants to steal it. But causing trouble at such a critical moment is very risky. Nearby, Shou is amused to see that even among the rebels, there's a power struggle. Ken Siming says he's being wrongly accused and that he will always be loyal to Daoist Daoju. He places his hand on his chest and tells everyone he knows she wants to end the Qian dynasty, but she also doesn't want to become empress. That's why, as her subordinates, they need to find someone worthy to take that position. He points to the remains on the ground and says that was Qu Shidao, the great prince of the Jing nation. He was known as the #1 general and led an unstoppable battalion. That's why he came seeking the dragon's power, but was completely defeated by the demons of the plains. Tu Yi doesn't even seem to know who these plains people are. And Cleopatra over there, whom I know the author will eventually draw with great attention, says they were defeated by her girl named Aina. Cleopatra's name is Aina, and she is the sacred maiden of the plains people. And that thing she's riding on seems to be her so-called girl. Other rebels point at her and say that those plains demons weren't welcome there. They wanted the dragon's power, but were overestimating themselves. Aina looks at them and asks if this pack of dogs is barking at her. She admits it's true that the Qian nation had much more prosperity than the plains. However, if this place were that great, none of them would be playing rebel cosplay. Oscar gets confused and tells her to explain what she's doing there. The girl then declares that she will conquer the dragon's head and unify both the North and the South. Anyone who shared the goal of uniting the entire world under one rule could join them. Everyone seems to be affected by this influence. Even Dongsuan is thinking that unifying the world and ending the chaos might be a good idea. Shan Yuan knows that uniting the world would leave a lasting legacy in history. Everyone is talking about Tu Yi's supposed greatness without understanding what's going on. Apparently, it was brainwashing. He realizes something is wrong with this woman, and it's strange because he can't see her stats on the panel. Here it is, folks, the panel that the artist took 36 minutes to draw. Thank you, artist. Aina then says that anyone who wants to join must pass a test, and they only accept the elite. It seems she's copying someone's phrase, and Tu Yi finishes it by saying they don't accept trash. At that moment, she looks at him, wondering how he knows that phrase. And our boy thinks that this felt so familiar that he instinctively answered. A guy complains, asking if he's calling everyone trash, and he says he was just helping the girl finish her sentence. Then he turns to Aina and asks if she's saying he's trash. She says she's not talking about him, she's saying that everyone else there is trash. Man, I'm starting to think this girl transmigrated too. People get angry at her, getting ready to attack, saying she'll pay for saying something like that. They jump at her, saying this is her end. But Aina simply calls Aya her little monster and asks for help. The strange creature lets out a loud scream, and instantly someone gets grabbed by the neck. Man, what was that? A lightning strike hit, and the guy got disintegrated, it seems. She jumped, punched one guy toward another who got slammed to the ground. People are flying and dying everywhere. Meanwhile, our boy is pushing his group back, saying that a smart man knows when danger is bigger than strength. However, Ana notices this and points to Oya, telling you to prioritize killing that man. Tu-Yi thinks this girl is so petty. He just finished her sentence and now he deserves to die. Ana believes he's the only one not affected by her abilities, so in a main story, he'd be like a mini-boss. Her monster rips off another head and then charges toward Tu-Yi. However, Asha activates her escape technique, while Dongxuan delivers a powerful arcane kick to the monster's head. She warns Ana that she made a mistake coming into Hongsu's army thinking she could kill whoever she wanted. That was a huge disrespect to Daoist Daju. Suddenly, Ana calms down and says not to worry, they aren't enemies. Once again, she activates her power, saying they share a common goal, to destroy the Qian dynasty. The phrase destroy the Qian dynasty echoes in Tu-Yi's mind. He wonders why this is happening and if it's a result of this woman's ability. He looks to the side and sees Dongxuan already repeating the same words. While she's in a trance, Ana stands there with her sinister smile. Suddenly, she turns and says that first, they could kill the former emperor of Qian. At that, Ana smiles. She hadn't expected the bonus of having the former emperor right there. She's targeting our boy's entire group, who is always being protected by the women. But now, at least he knows the Sacred Maiden's ability. Everyone has a certain obsession in their heart, and this woman's ability is to amplify that and align it with her plans. Ana then says to destroy the Chan nation and continue on to kill Tu Kanjin. Under her control, Dongxuan moves toward Tu-Yi, repeating that she will kill him. Covering his ears, Tu-Yi says he already knows about her ability through the system and is aware of its flaws. Suddenly, a hand stops Dongxuan. It's our boy, saying that man is no longer the emperor of Qian. Killing him won't destroy the Qian dynasty. Dongxuan suddenly stops and begins to cry, or at least that's what it says. But Ana seems to be bursting with rage. Since Ana's ability relies on verbal manipulation, all you have to do is expose its logical flaw. That way, her ability breaks. However, he suddenly notices something. In the background, she's getting angrier than ever. She asks Dongxuan if her childhood dream wasn't to destroy the Qian dynasty. So why, now that the target is right in front of her, is she hesitating so much? Has she lost her willpower? Once again, they try to kill him while Dongxuan holds back. Our guy tries to say something, but there's no time and he nearly gets punched. Falling to the side, he realizes this girl just wants to solve everything with brute force. Unfortunately for her, her ability has another flaw. He then asks Dongxuan if she would be satisfied if Tu Kanjin died. Was her true goal to destroy the Chan nation or to create a peaceful place in the Central Plains? Completely frozen, Dongxuan starts talking about a peaceful land. Then she begins speaking about death, holding her head in confusion. Meanwhile, Ana asks what she's doing. Tu Kanjin then says that a person's obsession is rarely about just one thing. Dongxuan was a perfect example of that. She had an obsession with destroying the Chan nation, but also with creating a peaceful era. However, Ana's ability couldn't choose which obsession to amplify. At that moment, the desire to create a peaceful world was stronger. Ana is confused, not understanding how this boy already knows so much about her and Dongxuan. Then he throws his arm up and points at Dongxuan. He says that if the world falls under that woman's control, the North would invade the central region. So how would she save the people of this land? Now he's confident he's created a conflict in her mind that can't be fixed. The only option is to cause a system crash. This system crash is a bit peculiar, but okay. Ana is startled and Dongxuan begins to faint until someone catches her. Our boy comes in with his burning keyboard, saying that when it comes to debates, he's the master who ruled all forums in the world. Ana laughs, pointing at him, saying it's funny that he thinks he can win against her in this case. Everyone there falls silent for a moment. The monster starts getting up as Ana says the former emperor will be spared today. It would be great to have him as a pawn, but Tu-Yi wouldn't leave there alive. Now she's confident. Even though she lost control of Dongxuan, Dongxuan fainted, so he has no defense. What she didn't expect was that 2 other women would protect our boy. However, Ana doesn't seem to care and says killing them would be as easy as putting her hand in her pocket. I've never heard of that saying before. The monster charges forward, heading straight for the 2. Its hand is already reaching for our boy, and no one has done anything yet. At the last second, Xiao manages to stab its forearm. Then Asha slaps 3 talismans on the monster's face and activates the triple humiliation destruction. What? The move even has humiliation in the name. Her creature gets thrown far away, crashing into tents, and Ana is left confused, not understanding what just happened. Who were these 2 women beside him? Asha says their chance has come, but Xiao warns her not to lower her guard. Looking at the destroyed wood, she's sure this isn't over. Suddenly, a system window says the seal has been released. Obesification is starting and tons of stats are increasing. The system seems to ask Ana if she wants to suppress it. As Ovi arises with a green aura, of course, she says no. The monster then begins transforming into what looks like a werewolf. It lets out a roar beside her, saying now things would get fun. Asha and Xiao wonder if the woman turned into a dog. The group is terrified, and Dongxuan seems to be out cold. Wake up, girl. The 2 stand frozen when suddenly the creature lunges and lands a knee right on Asha's face. Whoa, man, don't hit the girl like that. Xiao looks to the side and almost gets hit too. But the wolf keeps advancing, delivering a barrage of attacks. Aina explains that this creature was raised by wild wolves as a child. It had an insatiable bloodlust, and she was the only one who could control its madness. However, by attacking now, they broke the seal and would pay the price. Poor Xiao is getting beaten and slashed from all sides. She can't find a chance to dodge any of it. The monster opens its jaws and bites down on her shoulder. Suddenly, Asha rises behind them. The monster holding Xiao by the shoulder slams her onto Asha. Both realize the creature is on a completely different level now. They crash into a wall and Chuyi approaches, asking if they're okay. Xiao tells him not to come any closer. The boy freezes as she stands up, realizing the monster is much stronger and faster than she is. At this point, she can only rely on the talismans Asha used before. The problem is, Asha seems to have already passed out. Poor Xiao says that yesterday she got struck by lightning from Dongshuan, and now she's going to die from a dog bite. She feels something approaching and tells Prince Tusu, and maybe she really will die here. But suddenly, the wolf pauses for a moment. The rebels group steps in front of it. Shulin asks since when the army allows dogs to walk in the courtyard. The mustache man says if this continues, the 5 of them will lose respect. The other 2 say it's time to end this. A guy in a bandana says it would be perfect to use this monster's skin to make a coat. Immediately, the other rebels start cheering them on, telling them to go ahead and kill the beast. Our boy is excited too, saying that finally the rebel leaders have arrived. Xiao smiles as the guys start glowing, charging forward. They must be weak and about to get wrecked, right? Of course, man. They got grabbed in a bear hug and slammed into the ground, exploding. Smoke rises, and when the crowd looks, only their little souls are floating out of their bodies. At that moment, Aina holds her stomach and can't stop laughing. But suddenly, Xiao looks to the side and asks what that person is doing there. At the same instant, the wolf begins approaching her. Knowing she can't escape, she grabs Xia and throws her into Tuyi's hands, telling him he urgently needed to kiss that woman. Man, even if he didn't want to, he had no choice because she shoved his head into Xia's mouth. The boy sacrificed himself, truly a hero of the nation. But he must have been holding a coconut water or something because how is it leaking this much? And it just keeps going. What's even happening there? He's using his hand. What's going on? Man, our boy is taking full advantage of this. All right, Xia needs to lose her mind and also have a woman to hate. In this case, it's going to be Xiao. Now I want to see what she'll do with that. Suddenly, Xia's eyes start glowing purple. While the little wolf looks confused at their drool, energy begins to surge from her body, electricity rising from the girl. She asks Figueres to steal her man. Xiao celebrates that it worked and immediately runs off, but she already spits out a purple energy ball. Xiao glances back and dodges, letting the blast hit the wolf. Apparently, it can't react in time, and half the field explodes. Aina screams for Black Fang, but a second later, Xiao is already behind her. As Aina turns around, Xia is already at her back, asking how she dares to touch her man. She fires an explosion at her, but Black Fang jumps in, shouting he will protect his master. Aina seems surprisingly calm for everything that's happening, and the explosion covers everything in smoke. When the smoke clears, the poor creature is lying on the ground. Aina looks down, but Xiao has already placed a knife to her neck, warning her to stay quiet. If she says anything, she'll lose her tongue. Meanwhile, our boy looks around and realizes the rebel camp he so desperately needed has been completely destroyed. He turns angrily toward Aina, who is now getting scared. He's sure she won't help him destroy the Chan Nation because she has no system window or status. Sensing his hatred, she activates her power and pleads for him not to kill her, telling him to lower his sword. But Tuyi knows this woman is too dangerous and her power could get him killed before he achieves his mission, so he must end this for the mission's success. Suddenly, she says something about a magical girl carrying a bag of rice. Apparently, it's a phrase from an old anime called Detective Conan. Upon hearing that, 2D halts his attack and everyone around him looks confused. He withdraws the sword from her head and asks if she's also from another dimension. Immediately, she throws herself at his feet, crying and saying yes. She's also a transmigrator who ended up in this world. He then asks Xiao not to kill her yet. He needs to talk to her first and understand what's happening. The poor girl is there, sobbing at his feet. Just then, Dongswen wakes up. Apparently, when she was standing earlier, the artist forgot she wasn't supposed to be standing. She gets up and seeing the destruction, asks what happened. She looks at Lin Chuan and sees the woman beside him. Immediately, she points at Aina and says she deserves to die for controlling her like that. But Tu Yi tells her to wait because this girl's life might be useful to him. However, Dongswen scolds him, saying he should stop coveting a woman from another race and that they need to deal with her. Aina pleads for just a moment, wearing an angry face. Then she says it's fine. Since he saved her once, she'll allow him to do this. Our boy then requests a soundproof room because he's going to have a serious talk. I thought Dongswen might get suspicious, but she just leaves, saying she'll prepare it. Tu Yi wonders if this wasn't jealousy. The scene shifts to the back of a cave, a table covered in blood, clearly not a welcoming place. Seeing all that, Aina trembles with fear about entering the room. Tu Yi thinks Dongswen misunderstood his intentions for this conversation, but to ensure safety, he really needed to confirm her identity first. He says something like, odd numbers change, even numbers don't. And she finishes the sentence saying, check the symbols quadrant. Apparently, they're going to throw anim quotes, stories, and references at each other to confirm they're both transmigrators. After about 300 references, he wipes his forehead and says it seems they're from the same world. Then he asks how she ended up here. She makes a weird face and says it's a strange story that happened a while ago. She asked in a forum which dynasty people would most like to transmigrate to. A user named Night Emperor started insulting her, saying only an idiot would want to go to the past. She got mad and started a keyboard war. But she accidentally knocked over a drink onto her keyboard, and the power went out. After that, she suddenly reincarnated as a confused baby. She says it all sounds ridiculous, but 2E realizes that Night Emperor was actually him. What's strange, though, is that she transmigrated into a baby's body. He pulls up a little chair and asks how she knew he was a transmigrator. Already seated, she says it was because he understood that reference when he finished her sentence about everyone being trash. The fool sits there realizing he really messed up by letting that slip. She then leans in close and says that as fellow transmigrators, they should form a team. He asks how and why, and she questions if he still considers himself Lee Chin-yun. Then she sends a mental message saying that even as a high-ranking officer, he must have trouble adjusting to this life. With his hand on his face, he admits that's obvious. He used to spend his days gaming, drinking soda, and watching videos. But now the food is awful, sleeping on that hard bed is terrible, and his entire life is torture. Apparently, during the mental message, she tried to activate her power again. She's confident because it seems like he hasn't noticed he's being influenced. She asks if he gained any special abilities since transmigrating. He says no, that all he has is a useless system. She comments that it seems his transmigration hasn't been as smooth as hers. Then she asks if he wants Big Sis to help him out. Suddenly, she feels confused. Just a moment ago, she was begging for mercy, so why is she acting like she's in charge now? She then asks if his goal is to destroy the Chan nation. He says yes, so what? Then she turns around saying she knew he wanted to destroy Qian and become king himself. But he's thinking that this woman is completely mistaken. He wants to destroy the Chan nation and leave this world. Who would want to stay in a horrible place like this? That's when he realizes she's trying to use her power to control him. Suddenly, she starts taking off her shoe and says she might even give him a dragon vein if he listens to her. She even offers to let him kiss her foot because she's sure he's never done anything like that. The girl puts her foot in his face and he's fuming with anger. Out of nowhere, he covers her mouth and ties a bandana over it. She can't speak anymore, and he comments on this nonsense about grabbing the dragon's head and becoming king. He says he's tired of people constantly trying to shove their ideas into his head since he transmigrated. He can't believe even another transmigrator doesn't understand how he feels. Gagged, she realizes her power won't work like this and silently pleads for him not to get closer. He leans in and says he'll tell her what he truly wants. Poor thing can't say anything, and honestly, I have no idea what happened next. Later, he slams the door open and she comes out behind him. He looks around and sees that everyone was waiting for him. The girl is gagged and completely red-faced. The three of them instantly assume he's a shameless pervert. However, Tianyuan seems moved, saying of course, this boy would be an emperor. Only someone using the attraction of his own body could defeat Dongjuan and even the plains Demonis. Seeing everyone's reactions, 2E tells them not to misunderstand. He only gagged her to seal her powers. Dongjuan reassures them, saying not to worry because her night with him lasted much longer. Before anyone could react to that strange comment, a man approaches. He informs them that the Rebel Alliance has reorganized and is awaiting orders to search for the Dragon Veen. Dongjuan says to let them go because she would handle it personally. For some reason, 2E seems scared upon hearing this. The scene shifts to the mountains where she leads the troops forward. She appears to be using some power to locate the veins, while our boy realizes the rebels are difficult to deal with. They built their base near the Dragon Veen, so anyone trying to hunt for it will end up being hunted by them. Suddenly, Dongjuan stops, turns, and says they finally arrived. A strange energy moves toward them, revealing a desolate place. Everything is dry, lifeless, with bones scattered on the ground. 2E wonders if this godforsaken place is where the Dragon Veen is. Then the rebels approach her, asking if she's in the wrong place. How could the Dragon Veen be in such a wasteland? That's when a golden explosion erupts behind her, and something rises into the sky. Amidst all that, a gigantic door radiating light appears. Everyone instantly knew this was the Dragon Veen. The rebels rush in, desperate to enter. As everyone charges forward, 2E celebrates. He wanted them to conquer the entire Dragon Veen, so they could help him gain enough strength to destroy the Chan nation. Even the gag girl is laughing. However, Chio wants to kill them all, saying the Dragon Veen is connected to the nation's fate, so the rebels must not gain control over it. But 2E says he's in no hurry, so why is she so tense? Shanyuan says the Emperor has unmatched wisdom. Those who go first always trigger the traps. 2E then raises his hand and says it's time for them to enter. With that, the group moves through the golden gates. The entrance behind them seems to close. As they walk inside, our boy is impressed, wondering who could have built something like this. They stop in front of a door, hearing people screaming that everything inside belongs to them. Shen Yuan remarks that it seems they've run into a situation. They approach the door to see what's inside. The rebels are buried in mountains of treasure. The men were crying, saying that with so much wealth, no one needed that so-called dragon treasure anymore. Xiao and Aina told them to check out other rooms. In one of them, the beggar sect was fighting with the Shanghe society over who would keep the weapons. An old man was staring at a scroll, saying that if he had read this as a child, he would have been a martial arts genius. Everyone there was fighting over treasures, stirring up discord. Dong Xuan said that to gain recognition from the Dragon Veen, one must have the right character. Being tempted by such lowly treasures was the mark of a small-minded person. Shen Yuan commented that this must be the Dragon Vein's first test, and they needed to stay cautious. Tu Yi said a simple test, like this was easy for him. Dong Xuan turned to him knowing he wouldn't struggle since he had already made far greater decisions. But suddenly, she asked what he was holding in his hand. The boy actually looked like a merchant carrying 2 bags, a pot on his head, and a sword. He casually said it was none of her business. She whined, asking if he hadn't heard what she just said. This was a Dragon Vein test. Ignoring her, he walked into another room, saying he was sure there must be better treasure there too. Shan Yuan wondered why someone who ruled a nation and had seen countless treasures would be tempted by this junk. Our boy was thinking that if this Dragon Vein test was meant to judge whether he was greedy, then he'd be the most greedy person possible. He actually wanted to lose points, not gain them. Then he saw a bunch of people dead on the floor and wondered if they had been fighting over this pile of trash. Looking around at the treasures, he thought they weren't much better than national relics. The only thing in that room that could tempt him was a cell phone. Later, he approached the group, apologizing but saying he brought a little present. Smiling, he said he didn't bring everything he wanted but would share a bit. Xiao grabbed 2 daggers. Shan Yuan received a sword that he quickly recognized bore the dragon's mark. Dong Xuan got emotional over an ancient technique scroll. Xiao was delighted with her gift. Oddly, Aina received a peculiar whip. Tu Yi told her to hold onto it because when he returned, he'd use it on her. Man, this boy has a peculiar relationship going on. Dong Xuan thought to herself that at first she sensed an imperial aura about him, but now she wondered if she had been wrong. Suddenly, they felt a strange tremor and rocks started falling from the ceiling. Those still in the treasure rooms were crushed. The entire place collapsed as they screamed for help, dust rising everywhere. When they looked again, all the rooms were buried in rubble, with pools of blood beneath. Tu Yi was devastated, realizing that the rebel group he so desperately needed was dying so easily. Looking at the group, Dong Xuan noted they had entered with 158 people, but the first challenge had already killed over 100. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the hall, saying that the first test on the Imperial Path was the test of possession. Tu Yi looked up and then at his arm, wondering if it was the system. But it didn't seem to be speaking to him directly. The voice declared that those obsessed with worldly treasures lacked the quality to become an emperor and were eliminated. Only those who carried the world in their hearts and had a calm mind could proceed. Everyone sighed in relief for surviving. Tu Yi grumbled, asking if this guy would stop talking. Since he had stolen so many treasures, he was surely about to be kicked out. But then the voice said that only those who used treasures for the good of others had the right to rule this world. Immediately, a light shone beneath Tu Yi, and the voice announced that here stood true greatness. The poor guy was devastated, then his face twisted with frustration. Shan Yuan was thrilled, running over, saying this was truly incredible. He placed a hand on Tu Yi's shoulder, saying it was only natural for him to achieve this. But Tu Yi turned, clearly not happy. Aina stood by, wondering how he could be so clever as a transmigrator like her. Surely the boy's talent was terrifying. The others behind them wanted to know who he was, and someone answered that he was a traitor of the Chan nation. Other rebels murmured that looking at him, they could indeed sense the aura of a true emperor. Everyone in the room was talking about him. 2D tried to step out of the glowing light, but it followed him. He yelled for the damn system to turn off the spotlight because it was giving him a headache. But the system on his arm congratulated him for passing the Dragon Vein's test of possession. With that, he would receive the blessing of the place and imperial aura. Immediately, he asked if this imperial aura would increase his strength. The system replied no. The imperial aura was purely for style, making him look like an emperor. That was all. He was utterly crushed to realize this so-called imperial aura was just for show. With that, the voice in the hall announces that since a competitor has obtained the imperial aura, the next test will now begin. On the path of the imperial arena, the next challenge will be a test of strength. Suddenly, no one can see anything, and when 2D opens his eyes, he finds himself wearing armor. A group is gathered in a tent, confused about what's happening. Someone appears at the entrance and calls for the marshal, requesting him to begin the military assembly. The goal of this test is to lead the Muyang army to conquer the city of Songgu. To the south of the map lies the wide Lin Kang River. The Muyang army, led by Marshal Tu Die, is stationed near this region. 21 miles to the north stands the massive city of Songgu, the target of their attack. Songwu has 5,000 soldiers, while the entire Muyang army has 20,000. Both sides have sufficient supplies, so this battle could last for many months. Given the numbers in Songwu's fortifications, victory would be extremely difficult. A kneeling soldier informs the marshal that more than 5,000 troops have fallen ill due to a plague. The soldiers' morale is low and an urgent decision must be made. Shan Yuan and Tu Yi remain silent for a moment. Shan Yuan turns to Tu Yi and says this test of strength seems to be about the ability to conquer the world. Since they appeared in the same tent, they likely belong to the same faction. Tu Yi approaches the table and remarks that this feels like a game mission, and a tough one at that. Xiao comments that following Prince Tusu, she gains significant knowledge of military strategy. Typically, to conquer a well-defended city, one would need 10 times its population. But not only do they lack the numbers, their army is ravaged by a plague. Tu Yi, however, is thrilled, saying he loves extremely difficult games, especially when defeat is certain. This situation excites him even more, that it dawns on him that this brutal start must be the same for everyone. There's still the risk that if everyone performs poorly, he might end up with the highest score in this test. Shan Yuan suspects that Tu Yi might be considering using the plague to capture Songgu. Unfortunately, it would be an extremely cruel method, which is why Tu Yi seems hesitant. If that's the case, Tian Yuan decides to take on the villainous role and make the decision for him. He calls Tu Yi over and says he has a plan that could easily conquer Songgu. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the test, Dongxuan arrives at a camp, witnessing the spreading plague. She approaches a sick old man and uses her water-healing palm technique. The man begins to rise, saying he feels much better. He looks at her and says she must be an immortal living among humans, certain that the marshal will lead them to victory. Other infected soldiers begin to stand, falling at her feet and pleading for salvation. Dongxuan is unsure what to do. She recalls when she was a child and tried to help the hungry and the poor. She knows that alone she can't heal thousands of patients. It's like trying to put out a fire with a glass of water. But in that moment, this is all she can do. She tells them not to panic, promising that while she's there, everyone will be saved. She then asks those skilled in healing techniques to help treat the sick. Writing on a piece of paper, she hands over a prescription with ingredients needed for medicine. She stands and returns to healing the people. The scene shifts to another part of the test. At a banquet table, Aina bites into an apple and scoffs at the idea of 20,000 soldiers trying to attack a city defended by 5,000. Not to mention that many of their troops are infected. How could they possibly win? From across the table, someone says it's not that hard. It's Chen Siming, who claims that capturing Songgu couldn't be easier. He leans in and asks when they'll launch the attack. Siming then suggests they infect the 5,000 defenders. With a fast-spreading plague, the city would fall in no time. They could catapult infected corpses over the walls. Coincidentally, this is the exact plan Shan Yuan is explaining to Tu Yi. The only difficult part would be accurately launching the corpses into the city. Tu Yi thinks Shan Yuan is incredibly cruel. Even the king of hell would bow to such a plan. With his hand on his face, Tu Yi mutters that this is a vicious strategy, not something a wise leader would do. Shan Yuan argues that there is no mercy on the battlefield, but Tu Yi tells him to wait. He announces that he has a much better plan. A soldier nearby wonders what plan that could be. Tu Yi should know that to invade a city like Songgu, you need 10 times the number of troops. But with what they've been given in this test, a direct invasion is nothing more than a dream. Tu Yi admits that the army's morale is far too low. He plans to retreat to the lake and wait for a better opportunity. Xiao mumbles to herself, thinking she expected a decent plan. But he just wants to run away because he knows they can't win. Worse, he's acting like he came up with some brilliant idea. But in reality, he's acting like a coward. Shan Yuan, with his hands on the table, tries to convince himself that he still can't comprehend the plans of an emperor. There must be something deeper behind all this. It was a shame that his military knowledge wasn't enough to understand His Majesty's thoughts. Tu Yi then raises his finger and says that, in addition to retreating, they will take all the infected soldiers with them, even those who can't even walk. Shan Yuan is shocked and says that's impossible. The infected can't be saved, and bringing them along would spread the plague and slow down the army. But Tu Yi responds that no one gets left behind or abandoned. That's how he treats his soldiers, and he asks if this answer satisfies Shan Yuan. Shaking, Shan Yuan merely says that the humble servant would never object. Xiao just watches in silence. The scene shifts to the city of Songgu during Test 3. An infected body is inside a sack. A catapult is prepared while soldiers stand terrified. Even unwilling to be part of this, the officer is forced to give the order to launch the bodies. From atop the wall, Songgu's army shouts for everyone to take cover. But when they look up, they see dozens of corpses flying toward them. From afar, they hear soldiers screaming to throw the bodies back out. Yet the commander of the attacking army orders them to keep firing. Bodies are continuously launched, and he's already dropped his sword. He can no longer continue. For so long, those people were his soldiers, but a hand rests on his shoulder, urging him to keep giving orders. It's Aina, who asks if he forgot what he desired most. After this war, he could return home and get married. Under her hypnosis, he agrees, saying he can do this. He steps away while she wipes her sweat, annoyed by how tiresome it is dealing with complaining soldiers. Simon praises her, saying the Sacred Maiden's power is truly impressive. He can't believe Songgu will last much longer. On the first night they launched bodies, the soldiers on the walls threw them off. But within 24 hours, they stopped, likely because the plague spread among those stationed on the wall, leaving them terrified. Aina then orders Oya to jump over the wall and open the gate from inside. Aya quickly charges and easily scales the wall. With few guards atop the wall, Aya takes out the first two with ease. Seconds later, the gate opens. The army cheers, raising their weapons, praising the Sacred Maiden's brilliance. Simon remarks that this victory is too easy, but Aina credits him as well. She raises her arms and commands the troops to advance. Eagerly, the army begins crossing the walls. Aina leads on horseback, declaring it's time to conquer the world. However, as they enter, the city is eerily silent and empty. She wonders what's going on and why no one is in the streets. Even with the plague, it shouldn't be this quiet. There was only one reason it was this easy. Suddenly, something approaches from behind. Arrows rain down on her army. Men scream they've been ambushed and shout to retreat. Looking back, she sees Song's forces advancing. A man on horseback steps forward, saying they finally showed up. Nervously sweating, Aina asks who he is. He introduces himself as Lu Yu, a Song practitioner specialized in plague manipulation. The scene shifts back to Test 1. Lai Qianyuan, now wearing a mask, looks exhausted. Soldiers ask if he's alright and he assures them to keep moving the wounded. Suddenly, someone calls for Lord Lai. It's Sha, who reports something strange that must be addressed. Apparently, this plague has magical traits. They suspect the illness is being caused by someone. His expression darkens and Sha confirms it before he can speak. There's likely a plague sorcerer affecting Songyu's soldiers. Qianyuan realizes they narrowly avoided disaster. Had they invaded, they'd have walked right into a trap. In the background, Xiao listens closely. She wonders if Tu Yi had already suspected this and that's why he wanted to retreat. Back with Aina, her army is being slaughtered. Their plan never stood a chance because the plague would never spread with a sorcerer in the city. She realizes she walks straight into his trap. From his horse, Lu Yu mocks her for the foolish plan of launching bodies. Aina now understands that those corpses pose no threat, which is why the city was so quickly abandoned. Lu Yu admits she's smart and cruel, and she might have succeeded if he weren't there. Aina smirks, saying that if he dies, she still has a chance. She commands Avia to destroy him now, but Lu Yu stands firm. Aina glances back. Aya has collapsed on the ground, defeated. Before them, Lu Yu unleashes a massive green dragon aura. Aina realizes her only option is to flee. She bolts, abandoning the battlefield. Her soldiers call out for the Sacred Maiden, but it's too late. She's gone. However, upon reaching the castle exit, she finds it blocked by crowds desperately trying to escape. Immediately, she orders Oya to scale the walls. However, someone grabs Aina by the shoulder and others pull at her arms, begging to be saved. They cry that they don't want to die and plead for help. Seeing this, Aina only thinks about how annoyingly clingy they are. She uses her power, commanding them to sacrifice their lives to protect her from that emperor. But everyone responds with a firm no. Their desire was never to die for her. One soldier says his only wish was to return home and get married. She had lied to everyone and used sorcery on them. Suddenly, Aina coughs up blood. Trying to use her ability on so many people at once push her body to exhaustion. She collapses to the ground, staring up as everyone approaches to kill her, calling her a lying witch who deserves to die. The scene shifts to people wandering through a desert, crying for help and saying it hurts so much. Among them is a younger Dongshuan declaring she could save everyone. All she needed was to become stronger. Back in her army test, Dongshuan approaches a room full of infected corpses. She uses healing magic and one man feels better for a moment. But she begins to grow exhausted and soldiers beg her to stop pushing herself so hard. If she kept going, she would die. But Dongshuan insists she's fine. Then suddenly, she seems to have an idea. She stands up and says they're right. She doesn't need to continue. Soon, this will all end once and for all. The city walls ring the alarm bell, warning of an enemy cavalry attack. The soldiers panic when they see a girl surrounded by lightning approaching. It's Dongshuan, who has decided to end everything herself. Lu Yu approaches and asks if she's the mage who suppressed his plague. She introduces herself, saying her name will be remembered in this world. Lu Yu praises her, saying that using precious magic to save mere ants was impressive, but even she had been infected, making it all pointless. Dongshuan replies that it doesn't matter. In the end, defeating him will be much easier than saving people. A skeleton appears behind Lu Yu, saying she has a heart that follows a true path. At least she's a worthy opponent for him to fight seriously. Dongshuan spreads her arms and unleashes her aura, declaring this is what she came for. An explosion erupts and suddenly she opens her eyes. She says she's about to win, but then wonders what this white aura surrounding her is. Aina, beside her, asks if she finally woke up, remarking that Dongshuan must have been beaten badly to wake up so desperately. Both of them had finished the test. Dongshuan asks if Aina was eliminated that quickly. They start bumping heads, with Aina teasing that she must have been defeated by Lu Yu too. Dongshuan responds that if she hadn't been weakened by the plague, she would have won. But then she realizes that even if she had saved her strength, she wouldn't have faced Lu Yu, so there was no solution. No matter what path she chose, victory was impossible. Looking back, Dongshuan sees Tu Yi still lying down. She knows his strength isn't much greater than hers, so how is he lasting so long? Worse, he's wearing a dumb smile while sleeping. For her, this test seemed impossible, but now she's curious about what he's capable of. Meanwhile, across a vast river, Tu Yi's army approaches. Standing before the destruction, he wonders if Song's forces could be any more useless. He's deliberately dragging his infected army and the wounded, making sure the enemy sees their weakness and tries to exploit it. Once they cross the river, it will be impossible to defeat them. Looking at the mountain, he mutters that he gave them a chance to win, but they completely failed. Chan Yuan starts to realize 2D is waiting for the enemy to cross the river, so he can strike them mid-crossing and win. Maybe bringing the wounded and the plague was all part of the plan to bait the enemy. But even an emperor can't foresee everything. Although the map showed a bridge, it didn't reveal how fragile it was. Chan Yuan tells Tu Ye there's no time to waste, they must cross and prepare. But Tu Yi thinks there's plenty of time to waste since the enemy isn't attacking. He remembers telling the army they would cross the river, but standing around doing nothing isn't helpful. He needs something to buy more time. He glances at the soldiers near the bell and Chan Yuan, while Tian Yuan insists they're running out of time. Tu Yi approaches his soldiers, telling them that their injured brothers are still in danger, so he could never cross first. Chan Yuan wonders if bringing the wounded was a trap or if he's misunderstanding something. Tu Yi raises his hand and declares that among their ranks are brothers who are still hurt. The sick and the medics will cross first, while the generals will guard the bridge. Immediately, one soldier sheds a tear. They approach Tu Yi, calling him the reincarnation of Buddha. Everyone weeps, saying they are forever grateful, and that from now on, he owns each of their lives. The rest of the healthy army says they feel safe following this plan because they know that if they ever fall ill, they won't be abandoned either. Meanwhile, others cry, declaring that this is what a true marshal looks like. Tu Yi starts wondering why even these NPCs in this strange story are imagining things now. But with everyone crying in front of him, he has no choice but to let them think whatever they want. The soldiers begin crossing the bridge while Tu Yi watches. Then he hears footsteps behind him and turning around, sees an army approaching from the mountain. Chan Yuan trembles, saying they're out of time. He turns to Tu Yi and tells the marshal to cross the river first. But Tu Yi stands firm and says the wounded will cross before him. Chan Yuan pauses for a moment and says it's time to prove loyalty. Some men from his group approach and apologize. In that instant, Chan Yuan already knows what's coming. The soldiers grab him and shout to protect the marshal at all costs. Meanwhile, elsewhere, she asks where they are. Together with Xiao in a forest, she wonders if this ambush plan will really work. Xiao turns and says she's starting to understand Tu Yi. He's a professional when it comes to using trap techniques. This time wouldn't be any different. Xiao remarks that Xiao once fell for a plan just like this. Embarrassed, Xiao admits it's something similar. This time, Tu Yi is using the infected soldiers to lure the enemy army out of the walls. Xiao asks why they're just waiting there. Xiao explains that Tu Yi will likely choose to spring the ambush later. Their job is to wait and strike as an extra force from the outside. Once the enemy crosses through the narrow mountain pass, they will attack from behind. If the enemy rushes forward, they'll fall right into Tu Yi's ambush. In the end, the enemy will be surrounded from both sides. Xiao smiles, saying that's how they'll achieve a great victory. But suddenly, an origami bird approaches Xia. Xiao asks what's wrong. Xia reports that a cavalry unit advanced down another road a mile away, which means they set up their ambush in the wrong place. At that moment, the cavalry is already advancing. Chan Yuan realizes they're doomed, with no time left to cross the river. The soldiers form a wall in front of Tu Yi, saying they must secure the marshal's escape first. Tu Yi internally curses these NPCs, thinking they should just die already. He asks if they're ignoring his orders. He commands everyone to cross the river with him, but they remain in place. He questions if they're going to disobey a direct military command. Still, they insist, urging the marshal to go first. Tu Yi realizes there's no way out of this. He slaps a soldier's hand and says fine. Chan Yuan watches and thinks now the emperor can retreat peacefully while they hold the enemies back. But then he's shocked to see Tu Yi drawing his sword and slashing the bridge. The soldiers turn confused. Tu Yi says that at first he was making decisions to completely fail this mission. But little by little, things were changing. He knew that this army was made up of NPCs, and when he returned to reality, none of this would matter. But he was tired of using others' lives as a tool to complete a mission. Chan Yuan is stunned. Tu Yi declares that he knows these soldiers don't want to die in shame, so who among them will follow him into battle and face death with honor. The Songnu army continues advancing. Their orders were simple: exploit the enemy's retreat and crush them while their morale is low. But what they found was completely different. A spear formation full of resolve, led by Tu Yi himself. The armies clash and horses' bodies are flung through the air. The enemy charges into the spear formation and gets torn apart. Tu Yi stands still, watching the war unfold. Enemies keep falling before them. Chan Yuan realizes he had been thinking too narrowly. Tu Yi's attempt to cross the river was just a decoy to bait the enemy into a desperate attack, allowing him to control the battlefield. One of the enemies halts, confused. A golden light radiates, Tu Yi's face glowing, raising his soldiers' morale. The Songnu army thought they were facing troops destined to lose. But now with their backs to the river, Tu Yi's army is fully motivated. It's all or nothing. He managed to transform the spirit of people plagued by disease and facing death. Tu Yi raises his sword. Even he wonders what he's doing. From the start, he didn't want to win this. But now somehow he feels an odd sense of hope. Someone approaches, It's Xiao and Sha. Xiao looks down the mountain and sees the enemy army below. She says this is the perfect chance, but she urges her to wait. Xiao insists, saying 2Yi's ambush failed, and they need to act now before the entire army is annihilated. However, Xiao warns that the enemy has a powerful mage and far more troops, so if they attack now, it would be suicide. Sha questions if Xiao is scared, but Xiao firmly says she's not. All Xiao needs to do is look at the battlefield. The Emperor's troops weren't losing, and she believed in him. Xiao hadn't expected 2Yi to actually hold out this long, so she decides to cooperate for now. She agrees with Sha, saying they will wait. The moment the mage sends his remaining troops into battle, their chance will come. The Songwu army continues to march forward, calling 2Yi's soldiers diseased ghosts and shouting for them to die. The battlefield had become a pool of blood with someone dying every second. One soldier from Songwu orders a retreat to make space for the second wave, but when they try to pull back, they run into other troops. Instead, they realize they'd already been flanked. 2Yi's cavalry shouts that even sick, they will fight to the death. They charge at the Songwu forces, promising that no one will leave alive. A Songwu officer, shocked, can't understand how these dying soldiers are so resilient. He wonders where their leader is, accusing him of hiding and using his men as cannon fodder. But 2Yi is already beside him and swiftly beheads him. He says he no longer cares about the test, victory, or defeat. He's simply going to give everything he has in this fight. At that moment, his combat power reaches 95. Raising his sword, he commands his soldiers to follow him. They charge forward, pushing everyone to advance. Meanwhile, Lu Yu, standing with his troops, begins to feel uneasy. Xiao tells Shay to prepare because their moment is approaching. On his horse, Lu Yu admits they're forcing him to deploy his last troops. It's impressive, but this is the end of the line for them. He raises his arms and mocks that 2Yi is too young, allowing himself to be swayed by the battlefield. His troops begin advancing, confident that even if his front line collapsed, he could retreat to Songwu and defend the city. But suddenly, Lu Yu's expression changes when he hears something behind him. Of course, it's Xiao leading a surprise attack. She declares this is their last chance to support 2Yi. Lu Yu is stunned, unable to understand why a hidden army was waiting behind him. Meanwhile, 2Yi continues cutting through enemies, focused solely on victory. But the Songwu elite forces begin closing in on him. Shan Yuan recognizes this as the enemy's trump card and worries Lu Yu might get hurt. A banner is raised but is quickly destroyed. It's Sha launching fireballs into the battlefield. Shan Yuan watches in confusion as a warrior runs through the chaos. He hears someone shouting that the general of Songwu has been killed, and that surrender will spare their lives. A soldier pauses, wondering when the commander's banner fell. Then a horse tramples him, and soldiers are pierced one after another. At that moment, the Songwu army loses its will to fight and their morale crumbles. With ease, 2Yi's forces claim a triumphant victory. Amidst the bloodshed, Lu Yu insists he's not dead yet. Standing atop a mound of bodies, he declares he's still alive. But someone nearby says it doesn't matter. Xiao points her sword at him, stating it's all over. Suddenly, a red aura seeps from Lu Yu's body as he laughs. He admits that, in the end, he was truly defeated. He explodes in a green aura, confessing he never expected such a brilliant plan. Shan Yuan laughs and asks if even Shio's ambush was part of 2Yi's strategy. From start to finish, it was a masterpiece. But 2Yi bluntly says he has no idea what Tian Yuan is talking about. Placing his hand over his chest, Tian Yuan vows to become someone who understands the Emperor without needing words. Suddenly, 2Yi pauses and looks at his trembling hand. He turns back and the entire army erupts in cheers, shouting that they finally won and can return home. 2Yi watches his soldiers crying with joy and stands still, thinking that in the end they really did earn that like in this video that helps Mamoru make more juicy content for his viewers. Activate the cheeky little bell, and I'm out.